Thank you, members. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this month's meeting of the Scrutiny Panel. Also, welcome to Councillor Bryant, Councillor Faruqi, first time here tonight. And thank you to all the directors and cabinet members for coming along as well. Just a few housekeeping things first. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the main staircase, opposite the lifts in the foyer. Assembly in Hawley Square on the green, and officers will assist us and advise us when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone please present ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and they're not used to make or receive phone calls while the meeting is in progress. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting this evening? And that's a no. Let's move on to the next item. I've received one request to speak under 20.1, and that's for Councillor Manners on item number 4. I've not received any requests for public speaking. I know we've got some members of the public, but I've not received any requests. So we move on to the agenda. Apologies for absence. I have one apology so far from Councillor Warrow. Have we got any more?
Apologies from Councillor Pope and Councillor Dabrow.
Thanks, Councillor Curry. Are there any declarations of interest? And that's a no. Okay, so moving on to item 3, to approve the minutes of the Overview Scrutiny Panel held on the 30th of May. A copy of the minutes are attached to the agenda pack. Everybody had a chance to read them. Can I have a proposer, please?
I'll propose.
Councillor Moore proposed.
No, I wanted to ask if I could make a minor amend, please.
Okay,
I do appreciate that we can't reflect what every councillor says, etc., in the minutes, but in the discussion about prioritisation, I did make the point at an early stage in the discussion that in the light of what we had learned during the overview and scrutiny training, I felt that the scoring matrix that we had was too limiting and that we should actually review the matrix, and I had the feeling that I had support from some of the other members in that respect, and that isn't reflected in here, and we've gone ahead and used the existing scoring matrix, and I just wanted it recorded, please, that some of us were not happy with the scoring matrix, and at some appropriate point, if this wasn't the appropriate point, at some appropriate point it would be a good idea for us to have another look at that.
Thanks, Councillor Austin. Charles, can we show an amendment there for that?
Thank
and
you.
We can come back to that on item number 7, have that discussion again in a little while, so thank you. Okay, so moving on to, oh sorry, did I get a proposer? That was Councillor Moore, and anyone second? Councillor Cupp, thank you. Moving on to item number 4, that's the Cabinet... Sorry? Oh, sorry. All members agree. Agree, thank you. So moving on to item number 4, the Cabinet member presentation. We've got Councillor Everett, our leader, along this evening to give his presentation on his vision for the Council.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for this invitation to speak to the committee. I hope my voice is going to hold up a bit better than it did last Thursday. I'm not used to that experience, but it was croaking a bit at the end of the Leader's Report. You will have heard me say some of what follows at full council last week, but I think it's important to present things in the round because this is an opportunity to have more of a conversation because of the limits on what's possible there. As far as the new administration is concerned, I think this is a great time to be coming into office. Louise Askew is going to talk to you tonight about the Levelling Up programme and the Margate Town deal, so I'm not going to speak about them in any detail, but obviously they are a big part of what we are aiming to deliver for Thanet. If this capital investment is successful, which I believe it will be, it will have lasting benefits that go beyond the scope of the 6 schemes themselves in terms of jobs, skills and the economy. There are inevitably going to be different opinions about individual projects and priorities, and there are some challenges, but it's great to have the opportunity 2 years on to be able to carry forward ideas that were put together under the previous Labour administration. This capital funding and the similar backing for Thanet Parkway should give us a platform, or 2 platforms if you like, to move forward. But the main reason we attract it is the significant level of deprivation within the district. We can't ignore the fact that we have suffered from a major year-on-year withdrawal of revenue funding over the last 13 years, which has had a significant effect on our ability to deliver services to the standard that our residents expect, and that is now being compounded by inflation. Despite that, I am full of optimism about what we can achieve. One reason for that, which the public in general probably don't appreciate, is the talented people that we have working for us, including at senior levels. They have a level of commitment to this district and the residents, which I think is probably unusual in a local authority. They've had to deal with some difficult and unusual challenges, and some of the public would probably ask where the outcomes are to show how good they are. But part of that is a consequence of how stretched they've been. We've got senior people coming into post now who will relieve some of that, but the pressure to deliver is going to continue, including from the political leadership. It's also a big advantage that we have an experienced cabinet, 5 out of 6 members having been part of the previous Labour administration. All of our East Kent neighbours have also had a change of political control this year, and inevitably that has meant a steep learning curve in some cases, with new councillors going straight into executive roles. But that isn't the situation here, and it has meant that we've been able to hit the ground running. That's obvious when it comes to our Housing Cabinet member, Helen Whitehead, sitting next to me, and you have some specific housing projects on the agenda tonight before they go to Cabinet next week. So I'm not going to go into those. I don't need to repeat myself on this really, but providing affordable housing is absolutely at the top of our priority list, because it is the main thing we can do as a district council to improve the quality of people's lives. It's obviously a national problem which needs a national solution, but we can do better, and that's why as our first major policy initiative we are making a major increase in the council's plans to provide housing for those who need it, starting with the 42 units at Spitfire Green, but continuing over the next 4 years. We've set a target of 400 over that period because that is what officers are confident we can afford within the business plan. But if circumstances change and we can go further, then we will. And it's not enough, but it is enough to make a difference. And for the people on our housing waiting list who will get suitable council accommodation as a result, it's a solution. It's fantastic we've been able to do this just 2 months after taking office. And again, I want to give full credit to the housing and finance teams who've made it possible, because it's absolutely what we want to do as a Labour administration. You all know that Councillor Whitehead will continue to focus on housing issues, including the need for more in-house temporary accommodation and the work of the RISE team, which are also things which have a big impact on individual lives. Like other areas, we've had a steep rise in the numbers of people made homeless at significant personal detriment to themselves, but also, and unlike council housing, at a financial cost to residents generally, since providing temporary accommodation comes out of the general fund, affecting our ability to deliver other council services. There's nowhere that it's more important for us to deliver our services and in terms of our ability to manage the public realm, because of the role that plays in perception about our district, both for residents and visitors, and the effect it has on our economy. Our coastline is a huge natural asset, but the focus on managing the visitors that this attracts and the heavy footfall areas in our town centres has left some of our residential areas short, and even town centres suffering from an unacceptable level of graffiti in particular. One of our election pledges was to put more street cleaners back in residential areas, and I'm pleased to say that we will be doing that immediately, starting on Monday, using money that is already in the base budget but hadn't been committed. We haven't got all the staff yet, but the plan is to have 2 new teams of 4 who will work 7 days a week from 10 in the morning until 6 at night across the district's residential areas until the end of October. We also said that we would significantly step up removal of graffiti and fly tipping and make bulky waste collections more affordable, and we will. Members will be aware that there's a new head of cleansing services starting next week, and these are areas that we will want him to look at and come up with a plan as soon as practical. We already have the new motorised street cleaning machines, but sometimes you have to recognise that problems come down to the number of people you employ, not just how they are deployed. We argued for more street cleaners in the current budget, the Conservatives voted that down, and now we are in administration that we are delivering on what we said we would do. Of course, it's unrealistic to claim we can solve all the problems entirely, but we can do better. We want people to feel better about the places where they live, and where there are still issues, that the council is aware of them and is doing its best to address them. I also want to create better mechanisms for groups of residents to let us know when they still feel that we're failing, falling short in things like street cleaning and waste collection in their area. Improving that dialogue with residents and creating a more human face for the council, alongside more focus on delivery, is all part of building trust and enabling us to work more collaboratively. We also need to look at our processes, including around asset disposal, to improve the way we engage with residents. The new head of Legal and Democracy will be bringing forward proposals for changes to the Constitution in line with the recommendations made by the Independent Monitoring Officer, and we need to think about what opportunities there might be there. But with the public, I don't think it's primarily about what happens at formal council meetings. I think it's about culture. We have a good mix of councillors, including a number of new members who are going to bring a fresh perspective to old problems. We're going to be talking a lot about the towns and about Margate and Ramsgate in particular because of the combination of deprivation and the current opportunity there. But to be successful, we need to engage members across the council and across the district, because it's not just about one part of Thanet at the expense of another, or the views of one political group. As their time allows, I want a programme of ward visits by senior officers to see the issues firsthand and listen to members' views on what is needed. And I want to start that in wards where we have new councillors, to help build up their knowledge and the officer relationships that will help them serve their residents. I do think we saw benefits from some of the collaboration and cross-party working that happened between 2019 and 2023, and I don't want that to be lost. Obviously, we will have our differences, and I accept that it's the opposition councillors' roles to hold us to account, but there are also plenty of things that we can work on together. Climate change is an obvious one. Rob Yates will be leading on this and chairing the Cabinet Advisory Group, which has already done some really good work over the last few years. It's an issue that needs to be fully embedded in everything we do, and I don't want us to be in a position of having to approve another set of diesel vehicles because we haven't put in place the infrastructure that we need. We don't, however, live in a limitless utopia where every problem can be resolved to the mutual satisfaction of groups of residents with conflicting concerns, and we don't exercise sovereign power over what happens in Thanet. And the limitations of the planning process are a good example of that. We can only make decisions within the policy framework set by central government. A district council can only seek to influence Westminster, the county council, the NHS, the police, the utility companies and all the other private companies that operate here, which is what we will try to do in the interests of our residents. I want us to be outward facing and collaborating with and learning from our neighbours, because we can also have a louder voice with those external bodies if we operate as a region. Finally, I know members will be anxious for answers on specific issues, and we don't have all of those yet. We're about to embark on the process of putting together a new corporate plan. That will go through various stages of public debate, including overview and scrutiny, and it gives every member the opportunity to contribute to setting the Council's priorities for the next 4 years. If we do it right, then everybody should have a sense of ownership over the final document, and I'm looking forward to hearing from members across the Council about what they think should be in there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Leader. Speaking under 20.1, I've got Councillor Manners. I know you have got a question. I'm not sure if your question was answered during that presentation. Do you want to make your question? Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. In common with many other members here, I visited the Levelling Up funding exhibition at Ramsgate Harbour on Tuesday, and it was a really good opportunity to see the details on the proposed projects in one place. I believe we all welcome the regeneration to the harbour area and the valuable amenity it stands to bring to the wider community, but I'm concerned that the quality and viability of delivery of these projects may be undermined by inflation since funding was earmarked. At the same time, I'm mindful that the fact that 3.4 million approximately is allocated to Ramsgate Port Ro-Ro infrastructure from the Levelling Up funding. This is money in addition to the millions already spent in pursuit of a Ro-Ro ferry operator. As losses pile higher at the port whilst the council searches for an operator, where is the justification, please, for spending even more money? Why not ring-fence the 3.4 million to be spent only once contracts are irrevocably exchanged on a deal to operate the port before potentially throwing 3.4 million of good money after bad? With that in mind, has any approach been made to the Secretary of State for Levelling Up to allow cross-funding between projects to use this money to support the underfunding in other Levelling Up projects? I've also been unable to find accounts that show the proper apportionment of overhead at the port relevant to running a proposed ro-ro operation. Where are these figures, please? How much has been spent to date in pursuit of a ro-ro operation? What are the accounting principles used in the calculation of this figure? Can members be allowed access to them? It seems unthinkable, and I'm hopeful it's not the case, but we should have a thorough grasp of all of the costs of this operation in order to understand any negotiation with the potential operator. Do we actually now have agreed heads of terms from a bona fide port or ferry operator that show a profitable, viable commercial port, taking into account properly apportioned overhead? Finally, given the leader's very laudable statement to Council last week promising a fresh look at the way we do things, should this now not apply to the port? Stop spending money, ring-fence the 3.4 million, and if no terms have been agreed by the end of 2023, then draw a line under the process and pause to re-examine all our options on the port as an asset. Thank you.
Well, Leader, over to you.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of questions there. I'm not sure that they really fit into the context of what I was asked to bring in. I mean, you won't be surprised that I can't give you a detailed breakdown of the financial situation in relation to the port over recent years. I assume that the previous Conservative leader was very happy to proceed since she brought the proposal to Cabinet and Cabinet voted for it in terms of the ferry operation. I think Councillor Manners is slightly misunderstanding where we are in the process. We have invited expressions of interest in operating the port. I can't say too much about that, and because they're confidential. But I will say to him that both, I think Councillor Ashby, I think I can speak for her on this, and myself, were extremely confident that the council would secure an operator. And I think the indications that we've received have made me even more confident of that. But Councillor Manners is going to have to be a little bit more patient. I think it will be a very strange thing for us to do to halt the process at this stage, having gone all the way down the line and having this interest. I think you're just going to have to be a bit patient. But in terms of some of the information, I'm sure if you write to officers, they'll be able to give you some of the harder detail. I don't think I can try and do that in the context of this meeting. And obviously, Ms Askew is now here and she's going to speak about levelling up later on, so I'm sure she'll address some of the issues you've mentioned.
Thanks, Leader. Right, over to members of the panel for questions for our Leader. Anybody got any questions? All hands up at the back there. Councillor Green.
Yeah, thank you. The street cleaning teams is good news. At last, thank you. I guess, though, there's just 2 teams, so we're going to have to be patient before these teams get round to any individual ward. Is there going to be a schedule, or are there going to be priorities set?
Yeah, I mean, some of this is obviously operational decision making, which is really a matter for officers, but I can say that the brief that we gave officers, we wanted them working in residential areas and we wanted it prioritised around where we'd identified the need to be greatest. I mean, I think we're not quite there yet, but I think having two teams of 4 people working 7 days a week across the district is going to make an impact. People are going to see these people and they're going to see the benefit of the work that they're going to do. And the great thing is that this is base budget funding, so you know it's sustainable. And obviously one would hope that at the end of the summer period, at the moment, we obviously have to put significant resources into the tourist areas, which is one of the reasons why we can't deliver the service we'd like to be delivering in the residential areas. But this should enable us to do this through to the end of October, and then we'll see where we go. But yeah, I think it's great news, and I hope that the residents will see an improvement, and I'm sure if they don't, they'll let us know.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. On the point that Councillor Green made, which was not the thing I was going to ask about, way back in the day when we first set up the Ramsgate Litter Forum, there were schedules, street cleaning schedules that residents could look at that told them how often they could expect their street to be cleaned. I don't know how long that was the case, but it certainly did exist, and it would be of interest to see if we could get something of the kind again, so that people knew realistically how high a priority their street or their area was. Anyway, that wasn't what I was going to ask. What I was going to say was this sounds really encouraging, and I'm very impressed by it. Particularly, I like the working with the neighbouring councils and the whole business about making ourselves more user-friendly to residents and getting more of a dialogue going. What I wanted to ask you was, in 4 years' time, when you're looking back on this term of office, what are you hoping will have happened, particularly to deprivation in this area? How will we have made a difference to the level of deprivation in Thanet?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for your point about street cleaning schedules. I'm not quite sure that residents are really that interested in some kind of bus timetable of when the street cleaner's going to come along, as much as that they're actually going to get their streets cleaned. But we'll talk about that. Yeah, I think that there are a number of factors. I mean, this council on its own can't address the deprivation issues in this district. I mean, clearly, national government and the state of the economy plays a big role in that. I think that the things that we're doing in terms of the regeneration opportunities should drive some positive change. You know, I think we would like to see. You know, we've got the highest level of unemployment in Kent. You know, we've got a lot of youth unemployment soon. We would like to see those figures move down towards the average for Kent. Obviously, we'd like to eliminate it completely, but we don't live in a perfect world. And I think the things that we're doing will support that. You know, I'm biased, obviously, because I'm a Newington councillor, but I'm hugely enthusiastic about the levelling up initiative in Newington, and I think it's a good example of somewhere where I know that the Newington Community Centre team really wanted to do the project themselves, and they had an idea about what they wanted, and they were, let's be honest, a little bit suspicious about the council wanting to deliver it, and now they've seen what the council has put forward with the help of the consultants, obviously. They're absolutely blown away by it. So they're really excited by the way the council has engaged with them over that. So, you know, that's a fantastic example of something we can achieve. Yeah, I think that we want to see the indicators moving in the right direction, don't we? And we want to see people feeling better about Thanet, and we want to see, you know, the district to be more prosperous overall. It's hard to put metrics on it.
Councillor Bright.
Hi, and thank you, Rick, for your informative talk. I'd like to echo what Councillor Wing was saying about the commute. Sorry, Councillor Austin. I do apologise. I'd like to echo what Councillor. It's a great start, isn't it? What Councillor Austin was saying about the scheduling. I think, you know, if you're not in and people have cleaned your street, they haven't cleaned your street. And as far as you know, I actually think would it be possible to have some dialogue maybe with the communications teams here, so that there is a way of letting people know that, you know, street cleaning is coming, it's coming in your area, and when that might be, because, you know, I think all of us already, particularly new councils, are kind of, you know, that's the number one issue on people's minds at the moment. And actually, I think half the battle is clear communications, and it would be really, really helpful. So is it possible maybe to speak with someone in the communications team about having a strategy for making sure that people are aware of the good work that we do? Because it's not all bad news.
Aware, certainly. I mean, I think we want to create awareness and visibility for the teams doing this work. But, I mean, one of the challenges, obviously, is that you don't want an equal amount of street cleaning resource in each ward, in each area, because the reality is that the need for it is much greater in some areas than it is in others. So you don't simply apportion the resource out equally between the 23 wards. On its most simplistic level, it wouldn't be sensible to have 23 members of staff, one of them working in each ward, because there are some wards that would require 4 or 5 times as much, whether because they're on the seafront, they're in the tourist areas, or they're just, you know, they have particular issues. So I'm a bit sceptical about all that, but I'm sure it's something we can talk about outside the meeting, and I'm sure that Mr. Humber would have a view on it, and the staff in the operations area would have a view.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Sorry. Good evening, Leader. I very much welcome the news on the boost to the social housing numbers, because unlike some who wear my colours, I am actually a big believer in the necessity for this. I do have a couple of questions. As I say, they're questions and critiques rather than being critical at this point. Whilst it's very nice to get a standard of property that we're obviously looking for, and I'm not suggesting there should be anything less, rather a developer will always have a profit element. Would we not be better off doing as we've done elsewhere perhaps and building more of our own rather than going out to developers? Because again, I don't know enough about the history of this, but were these subject to a tender process or was the council approached with this? Because I think it's the way forward for the council and private developers to work together. It's just this seems to have come up very, very quickly on us, and there's a lot of questions about how it's afforded and the 18-year payback and that. So I think it's a good principle, but there are questions which I think everyone would like the answers to, but I'm trying not to sound too sort of judgmental or aggressive on this. It's just a very interesting avenue to explore. Was it a tender process or?
I think Councillor Davis, that all those sort of questions are going to be answered in yeah. I think Councillor Whitehead's going to have plenty of time to take those sort of questions.
Yeah, apologies, I
didn't
mean to steer off there. Sorry, but a very welcome initiative to add to those numbers indeed.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't want to steal Councillor Whitehead's thunder either, but I mean, I think that you're absolutely right that we would like to be building more of our own properties, but first of all, you have to find the land for it, and secondly, you have to all of the properties we build have a 40% subsidy, so that subsidy has to come from somewhere. So even if we in the case of the developers, it comes from the developer because the developer provides the property at 40% of the market value to the council. This wouldn't be any good if it was simply Thanet District Council replacing a housing association in taking over a 106 property on a development. What we're actually doing, as Helen will no doubt explain, is buying properties which have been assigned as Section 106, i.e. they should be used for affordable housing, which developers do not want, housing associations do not want, because local housing associations are particularly moved on to bigger schemes. They don't want to buy these small pockets of housing. So what would happen in those cases is that there'd be a challenge eventually to the planning consent, and those houses would the developer would try to put them on the market probably and sell them. So what we're trying to do is add to the total. You're absolutely right, though, that building our own houses and being in control of our own houses is a better situation, but we need to have the land to do it, and the finances need to stack up. The finances for this stack up. You know, there's been a lot of work done around that, and I'm sure Councillor Whitehead will go into it.
Councillor Wing.
Thank you. I've got a number of questions, sorry, Leader. But I will start by saying our 2 street cleaners in Ramsgate absolutely deserve gold medals. They do an incredible job. Whenever I see them, I thank them for what they're doing. They do, you know, in difficult circumstances, a lot of the time, I never see them sat, they're always doing something. So although we've only got a few street cleaners, the ones we have in Ramsgate have always been top drawer, I have to say. And I'm glad that rubbish is a key issue, because I think we all remember door knocking and speaking to locals, and some of the key priorities that people had were around tidy streets, safe streets and toilets, and I don't actually think our residents are asking an awful lot, and I'm not quite sure how we're not able to deliver that. But I think there needs to be some joined up thinking. King Street is a particular problem in Ramsgate. Every Friday morning, King Street and High Street, I drive past a massive amount of rubbish that is normally some households not managing their own waste. Have we got a way, is there dialogue between our street cleaners, who are obviously out at the chalk face, and then passing that information back to Street Scene? Because also Street Scene do an incredible job when I've reported landlords and homeowners that are not managing their rubbish, and that there could be an easy way of shortcutting the system by encouraging the street cleaners to actually give that intelligence back to Street Scene that can come out in force. Going on to toilets, I drive past most mornings
the Margate porta toilets, and they're always horrible things to use. You've got to be absolutely desperate, I believe, to use a porta toilet. But it struck me that, have we ever done a cost saving of comparing how much we pay to have those toilets there for a year against actually refurbishing, I think it's the Clockhouse toilets in Margate. You know, I know that 4 toilets on Addington Street for a day are £400 for the day. Is there some sort of cost saving to actually investing in refurbishment of proper toilets that I'm absolutely certain visitors and our own residents would prefer them rather than using a porta potty? Do you want to answer questions, then I go to the next one, Leader, or shall I just bombard you with all the questions?
Well, I mean, Councillor Wing, I mean, I'd be disappointed if you didn't have questions to ask me, but I think that possibly you're misunderstanding the purpose of this session in the sense that I was asked to give a vision, which is fairly elevated, and I've tried to talk on a high level, and obviously I'm not going to be able to give you precise details about costings of toilets in Margate. What I can tell you is that toilets are a priority for this administration, that we've been talking about them this afternoon, that the council's conducted a condition survey of all its public toilets, and we have some information about what it may cost us to do the required works to them. And I've asked Mr Humber to come forward with a paper in September to Cabinet so that you can see all that information and that there's a plan.
Thank you. You're operating at a high level. I'm sowing seeds and bringing us down to what things would look like for residents. That parking is another key issue that I really do think we need to address, and I welcome the parking review that's coming forward, and so I'm hoping that will make a real difference to not just residents but to visitors, and I sort of favour residents' parking schemes. Going back to the port, you know, I have worries and concerns about us being able to bring a ferry in, and actually the discussion was very much about cargo. There wasn't much mention of a passenger ferry coming in, which would be sad because I loved the Sally line. But I do worry. We're a small port. We don't necessarily have the facilities. I don't believe in the build it and they will come scenario because we've already refurbished the Ro-Ro and nobody's come. We presently have berth 4 and 5 still not functional. Still not operational. We don't have full costings, and Brett's clearly haven't put a planning application to put the said conveyor on top of that berth. So I worry that I worry as the council that spoke under 20.1 that we are going to waste a great deal of money, and I'd like to see the evidence behind our decision making. So, you know, you invest so many millions and you expect not an immediate return on those millions, but you certainly would have probably made some predictions forward. If you bring X in, it will have this benefit. If you bring Y in, it will have this benefit. So I'd certainly welcome a bit more the ability to scrutinise how the decision have been made. I also think it's really important for us to have in the back of our head the findings of the review of berths 4 and 5. I certainly think there are key principles there that we need to use on all the major spends moving forward. Otherwise, we're just going to make a number of mistakes again. And of course, I'm really concerned that we follow all the planning and environmental legislation and assessments in order to protect people and places. I have deep concerns about the lack of dust monitoring on that site. And I spoke at planning about the noise and vibration monitors were between the houses and the dust monitors were 1,000 metres behind the housing. And we still have residents with concerns about dust in their houses. None of us are experts. We need some proper dust assessment, and we certainly, if we're going to allow Brett's to expand, that assessment of dust needs to be undertaken so that we can be absolutely certain that we're not exposing people to harmful substances. Thank you. I think I want a guarantee, not a guarantee, I want us to apply the findings of the review of berths 4 and 5, because there was some very important lessons that were learnt there and were put down in that review. One of them was we knew we needed an environmental impact assessment right way back in 2014-15. There's going to be a lot of development on that port, and I want to be certain that we are going to put in place and take measures to protect people and places, and that means following the highest level of planning and environmental assessment we possibly can. And I'd just like that to be guaranteed, if you like.
Can you guarantee that, Councillor Everett?
Well, all I can tell you is that all the conversations I've had with Mr Humber will reassure me that everything that we do at the port is being tested legally and you know, will be an entirely proper process. So I'm confident about that. I mean, I sort of understand, I do understand why there is a lot of scepticism about the council's ability to attract a ferry operator to the port, because there have been a number of abortive engagements with some businesses who didn't follow through on their plans and their approaches. But I repeat, you know, both Councillor Ashby and myself, and I know because I've discussed this with her, while we've been leaders of the council, are aware of numerous approaches from major organisations who want to use Ramsgate Port. And my understanding is that the expressions of interest we have invited have produced a similar outcome. But I obviously can't tell you anything of the substance of that, and in fact I don't know the substance of that because it's not appropriate for me at this point to know it. But I am absolutely confident that there will be an operation from Ramsgate Port using the new infrastructure. And the reason why it couldn't happen previously is because we didn't have that infrastructure. In particular, we didn't have the border infrastructure, and we would not put it in place on a speculative basis unless the operators were prepared to make a commitment to us so we could make sure that the council wouldn't be out of money. We weren't going to do that, you know, and we weren't able to do it on the speculative basis that we were approached before. What we've got now is a process in which somebody will take on responsibility for running the port. They will deal with whoever's coming in and out. They will take the risk on that. This is going to happen. It is going to happen. And I really don't think we need to keep going over the same ground in terms of what's happened before, because sometimes you have to have a little bit of trust. And I think this process, you will see at the end of this process why we've been so committed to this particular route for the port.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Cupp, Councillor Davis, Councillor Moore and Councillor Brighton. I think we'll just wrap that up after that.
Thank you, Leader, for your vision. As many of you said, I think it's exciting, and I look forward to keeping you accountable with that and making sure that you deliver all those items. The thing that I wanted to ask about was, as I'm sure you know and are aware of, the youth of Thanet is something incredibly important to me, and you know, it's one of my proudest things that we were able to set up the Youth Council, and I just wanted you to, if you could, just explain where you think in your vision the Youth Council sits and what you would like to see of the youth involvement within the council as well moving forward, to ensure that we're not just delivering for people of the older generation or middle-aged, but also ensuring that there are the opportunities for younger people as well. Thank you.
Yeah, the Youth Council I think was a good initiative, Councillor Cupp, and I know Councillor Keane is very enthusiastic about it. I know the officers are very enthusiastic about it, and we want to look at the ways that we can take it forward. I know there's been a discussion about whether in future we could involve members of the Youth Council in our Cabinet advisory groups. That might be a bit dry and dusty, I don't know. But I think it's really up to the young people themselves as to how they want to engage with us. We can give them opportunities and we can see which way they want to take it forward. But I certainly think that they are a hard-to-reach group for the council in terms of, you know, we're not going to get responses to our surveys from young people. Probably anybody under 50, I should think, the way these things go at the moment. And we've got to be more inventive in terms of how we communicate with young people. And the Youth Council is a good start, but it's just a start.
Councillor Davis.
I'm going to mention the port, but on a slightly different basis to normal, because it's quite clear, I'm sure, to everybody that there's huge concerns about various different aspects, and we could sit here and backwards and forwards all night over those concerns. However, as well as importance, there's always priorities that come into things as well. And in a previous incarnation as leader, there'd been discussion about the risk of, well, we talk about London waste, but waste from anywhere being shipped through Ramsgate in order to feed various biomass burners and that. Would you give the same commitment that you gave previously as leader that that will not happen on your watch?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Leader, for your briefing. The two questions I have for you is regarding the street cleaning. It's all brilliant that we've got these two teams going, but hand in hand we have enforcement as well. And Councillor Wing did strike that area very briefly. But if we do find people that are blatantly fly tipping and causing this rubbish, you know, by enforcement, that's a positive way for us to even deter that, which means our street cleaners don't have so much work. So can you not proportion some of that money towards the enforcement team so that they are more proactive and able to do their work? Because I know they're overworked as well because it's a small team, but if we could look at that as well, that would be very helpful. And my second question was regarding toilets, whether you can confirm or quash the rumour that one of the reasons that the local toilets are being shut early is that the contractors that are doing this have to be back at their depots by certain times, which is why they're unable to stay open as late as they should be. And if that isn't the case, can we quash that? But if it is the case, can we look into that as a matter of urgency? Because some of our local toilets are being shut far too early when people are still out and about, and it's important that we have these facilities for our visitors and tourists. Thank you.
Now, my understanding is that the issue of certain toilets shutting early is about sequencing. It's about a small number of people who are going around closing them. They can't clean and close them all at once. I'm not aware of any issues about people having to be back at a depot by a time which is causing those particular toilets to shut early. I mean, clearly people have a working day and their working day ends at some point. But I don't understand that to be the cause of things. No. In terms of enforcement, I mean, we're aware, because we've talked about it, that one of the things that slows down the clearing of fly tipping is the need to look at the fly tipping and see whether there's any evidence that we can extract from it to try and pursue the people who've left it. So that is a challenge. But this initiative that we're doing here, yeah, it will address fly tipping, but it's not just about fly tipping. It's about lots of other things. It's about litter. You know, it's about some of the real problem areas that we've got. So, yeah, more enforcement would be great. More of everything would be great. But let's see where we go with it.
And lastly, Councillor Bright.
Thank you. Just wanted to come back to your point on working closely with town councils as well. I think that's really welcome. And thank you already to Steve, to Councillor Alban, for agreeing to meet with myself and the town clerk at Broadstairs to discuss the gardens and the street scene. Absolutely welcomed. I guess my question is, can we make sure that we encourage that to be the case on the officer side as well? So is there a way that we can make sure that officers are as open to communicating with our town council staff and respond to emails? I guess that's if there's any influence you can bring to bear on that, that would be very welcome.
You know, I think that's the direction of travel. I think the council recognises the role of the town and parish councils in taking on some of the responsibilities which in the past the district councils carried out, and that it can be better done at a local level, and it can be more fine-tuned and meet the needs of residents better. So I don't know why we would not want to encourage that communication. I'm sure we would. And you know, if that's a problem, if it proves to be a problem, then it's something we can talk about. But I'm sure that the attitude of officers will be the same as the attitude of members.
Marvellous, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, members will know last term we put together a paper which I asked you about at full council the other night, whether that's going to be taken to Cabinet, which is not on the next agenda, but hopefully will be August, will it? I don't know. Looking at you.
Well, I'm slightly dependent on Mr Hughes, actually. I mean, he could probably give you a better idea than me as to when it's likely to come forward.
It's currently with the Chief Executive.
I'll just keep passing it around. So, yeah, I mean, to answer Councillor Bright's some of the questions there, that we produced a paper in the last scrutiny committee, and there's all sorts of recommendations we made with parish forums, increasing channels of communication with town and parish councils and officers. So all those sort of things that you ask, and hopefully will improve and for the benefit of town and parish councils, which I'm a member of as well. One quick one.
It's a positive one. I mean, lots of our areas in Thanet are actually refurbished and looked after by our volunteers, and there's very much an informal support from TDC workers because there's a mutual respect for helping each other out, basically, because, as you said, most of us live here. Are there any plans to try and further support volunteer groups to undertake work? Or are there any plans to maybe formalise it so that volunteer groups have got somebody that they can go directly to ask for bag deliveries, to maybe maximise outputs for TDC and for resident and for volunteer groups?
Yeah, I think Ms Askew might be able to help in that in terms of the volunteer groups that are out there working in the community, people in the third sector. I'm certainly very enthusiastic about harnessing the value of the volunteers, and I think the council could do more to support and encourage them. There are challenges within that in terms of where the demarcation lines are. Obviously, as volunteers are fantastic, but at the end of the day, if volunteers stop doing something because they move away or they're no longer available, quite often you find that projects lapse, and that's the challenge, I think, in terms of that's why in the end it's better to have paid staff to pick litter up. And I absolutely applaud all the efforts of all the volunteer litter pickers across the district. But we wouldn't want the district's litter picking resource to be entirely volunteers, would we? We'd always want a core of permanent staff to deliver the core service. But I think there are ways we can work better together. You know, I think a directory of volunteer groups is very much something that we should all have access to. But how and when we can put that together, I can't give you an answer at the moment.
Okay, thank you, members. Thank you, Leader, for coming along and answering those questions. I know you're always very approachable, but I know opposition members normally only get that once a month 3-minute question to ask you about. Thanks for coming along this evening and answering everyone's questions. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 5, which is the purchase of 42 homes at Spitfire Green for affordable rent. I will call on Mr Porter, who is our Director for Housing, to introduce the report, and then I think Councillor Whitehead will take over then.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to say a few words of introduction to talk through some of the background to this and how the funding model works, and then I'll pass over to Councillor Whitehead, who wants to speak about the report as well. So firstly, so you all know that Council last week considered a report setting out proposals to deliver 400 homes over 4 years. The fundamental part of that proposal is that around about 60% of the cost of that programme will come from borrowing within the Council's housing revenue account, and around about 40% will come from subsidy of one form or another. And if you were at the members' briefing that I gave at the beginning of last week, I said that that subsidy could come from a number of different sources, including the use of our right to buy receipts, grant from Homes England, or subsidy from private sector developers where there are Section 106 agreements in place. This particular proposal, the subsidy is coming from the developer, and the homes are identified within the Section 106 agreement as being for affordable homes for rent. I think one of the key things to say about about us identifying which schemes we want to progress is something that the leader, I think, touched on in the presentation, is that we don't want to be competing with our housing association partners. We very much see housing associations as a part of the supply of affordable homes working alongside the council, and we don't want to be competing with them. But we can add value by taking projects that housing associations don't want to or are unable to deliver in their own business plans. So this particular proposal at Spitfire Green is the first one of those 400 to deliver 42 homes for affordable rent. We have developed with colleagues in finance an assessment tool to help us check the viability of each project that we bring forward to ensure that it covers its costs within the business plan period and to work out the point where the cash flow moves into surplus. And in this particular case, it moves into surplus in year 18. In the initial years, and I think this is the bit that limits our ability to do as many of these projects as we want, in the initial years there's a negative cash flow position, and in this project that negative cash flow in year one is 54,000. But we have been setting aside funding each year from the affordable rented homes we've already delivered. Thank you. From the affordable homes we've already delivered to help subsidise the programme, and we've got a budget of 300k per annum already within the approved budgets, so that we're covering the cost of that cash flow deficit in the initial years from that 300,000. There was a question about costs, which I might, since I know you're going to ask it, I'll deal with it now. The costs of our the next phase of our new build programme, there's about 4 sites in the programme that have already been approved and already funded for the council's own construction programme. The costs of those units are about £3,200 per square metre, and obviously, build cost inflation is affecting everybody, including us and including developers. We've just been checking the specifications for the 42 units at Spitfire Green, and the assessment of market value for those homes is around £3,200 per square metre. So there's not actually that much difference in cost. It's pretty much the same, provided we can secure subsidy for our programme that we're building and the programme that we're acquiring. So I hope that gives some comfort. And actually the programme over time will include both of those models. If we're going to get to 400, we need to take all the opportunities that come our way that stack up. I think that's probably all I want to say about the funding arrangements and what we're delivering, and I'll pass over to Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. And thank you, members, for having me here to talk about this. I am somewhat unsurprisingly utterly passionate about this item, and with very good reason. Our housing situation is, in terms of our records, already extraordinarily challenging. Our list currently stands at 1,604 households. The even more unfortunate fact is that our numbers certainly underestimate the scale of need. All individuals on our list are all individuals with an identified and documented need for housing. The actual number of households who require support in accommodation in terms of rent affordability and suitability of housing is without doubt much higher. Every day I receive more and more housing cases relating to housing suitability, rent rises, temporary housing, and continuing housing stresses related to the cost of living crisis. And to address that, we need to start from a literal foundational level. Rental rates across Thanet are increasing rapidly, as are eviction notices. Properties that 5 years ago cost around £600 a month are now routinely marketed for over £1,200. And as I find myself saying frequently, regeneration without infrastructure, such as genuinely affordable housing, is simply displacement. This should not and will not be the future of our community. These challenging times do require skill and creativity, and luckily we have these in abundance within our housing team. I always speak highly of housing, and with exceptionally good reason. Their ambition and commitment is extraordinary, and the work that went into enabling this is a perfect example. Housing have an established track record of successfully delivering new, genuinely affordable rented homes, and an absolute commitment to delivering. We are competent, confident, and committed to providing for our residents. But we need to do more and deliver what is needed quickly. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce this report that sets out our ambition and our methods to deliver over 400 new affordable homes for rent over the coming 4 years, a huge increase on our previous delivery rates. To reference Councillor Davis' question earlier, this is very much a mixed delivery, including our own high specification developments, with future plans for growth and energy efficiency and delivery via unused Section 106 units, which we risk losing if we do not expand our model to include them. I believe our members' briefing on the strategy listed both our previous and our currently planned developments, if you'd like to look at a breakdown of the sites that we've produced. It's very important to emphasise that these are entirely additional units. As Mr. Porter said, we are not in competition with housing associations. We do not want to be in any way. And we're simply determined to ensure that any affordable housing created within the planning system doesn't disappear and is used to house our residents. If housing associations are interested in different models of delivery and are moving away from the delivery of smaller numbers of units, it's important to adapt and include these properties to maximise the delivery of genuinely affordable housing in Thanet. Identifying this need and working to include it within our strategy is essential, because the growth of our housing portfolio directly enables further growth via rent revenue and even better provision for residents. This strategy begins with the delivery of these 42 homes at Spitfire Green. It's well known by now that direct funding to councils to enable social and genuinely affordable housing does not cover all costs related to development. As Mr. Porter said, our plans are based on 60% of the cost of delivering this programme being funded by borrowing within our housing revenue account, with the remaining 40% coming from external funding, such as affordable housing grants from Homes England, Section 106 planning agreements, or the receipts from right to buy sales. This is an approach that builds upon itself, a way to make housing actively work to deliver further housing, to make genuinely affordable rent a reality in Thanet. The purchases outlined here and planned for the future makes housing work to produce, a genuinely sustainable and entirely necessary step to guarantee the security of our residents. I fully believe that investment in housing is an investment in the future of our residents and in our future as a council. As such, I'm utterly delighted to see this item here, and as always, thank Housing and Finance hugely for the work that's gone into this project, and I'm happy to answer any questions alongside the excellent Mr. Porter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. So do members have any questions or comments they would like to make? Our hands up everywhere. Councillor Cupp.
I was expected to be picked first. Thank you, Chair. I know, indeed. Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. As you have rightly said, this is a very important subject and an incredibly important topic for the whole of the district, and the delivery of this is incredibly important. A couple of things that I just wanted to ask was, of those families that are on the housing waiting list, how many of those are families? Because from reading the breakdown of what this is actually purchasing, nearly 80% of the properties are one-bed flats, which obviously won't cater for families. So actually, how much of an indent will this take into those families that are on the waiting list? Because arguably, I'd say they are sometimes our biggest priority to make sure they're rehomed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm happy to answer this from my perspective and then get greater detail from Mr. Porter. We have a huge demand for one-bedroom properties, so that's our principal need in terms for providing for those who are on the list. So we do prioritise the one-beds so that we can ensure that we're catering for the majority of those that are lacking in that area. One beds are particularly in demand, but we also produce family units alongside that. So we always try and look at the proportions of what we're providing and to ensure that they reflect the list that we've actually got. So I hope that's okay from my perspective, but
I'm not sure I can add much to that, to be honest. I mean, just on the numbers, that the single people are actually the largest single group on the housing register, and more than half of the households in temporary accommodation are single people. So there is a clear need for one-bedroom flats. I mean, just happens that this is the first project we brought along, but across the entire programme, there will be a balance of different sizes.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you.
Again, yeah, very welcome these numbers. I'd just like to say it's not this project's fault. It's a shame, you know, it doesn't always send the best message that we've just built 42 houses on arable farmland that could have been producing. But what I'd like to ask is, just to confirm, the policy of this authority, though, is to prioritise brownfield development and infill in town stuff and so on over. Yeah, as I say, I know it's not this project's fault or anything. It's just a shame that the message it sends, you know.
yeah, I could potentially talk about this for hours, but that would bore everybody senseless. It's always been our priority to build on brownfield, and a lot of our developments are effectively infill between current developments. The situation with agricultural land, to a large degree, comes down to central policy. I do fight that on a national level, but in terms of what we're faced with, when we have developments that produce affordable housing, to my mind, a lot of the time, that's often the useful thing to come out of it. The only useful thing sometimes. So we're left with a situation of using those, because what we actually need is genuinely affordable housing, or losing them completely, in which case we have a development that doesn't provide for any of the residents on our list. I don't agree with a lot of the central planning policies, and do talk about that at length, but we are working within the limitations of the system that we're faced with. And I think we're doing the best that we can to provide for residents within that. Thank you.
Councillor Wing.
Thank you, and it's fabulous news. It's a shame it's only 42, but baby steps. You can only buy what you can afford, and I know you're absolutely passionate about people with additional needs. So I'd just like to ask: will any of the properties be disability or age-proofed? And I agree that our biggest section of people looking for housing are single people, and it's not just young single people, it's older and elderly single people. So it would be quite nice to know that some of the properties will be age-proofed or adapted for mobility. Have we also got an opportunity, if the next phase of green grants come through, to help maybe put solar panels on these buildings to actually remove or reduce exorbitant energy bills, because having a roof over your house is obviously the number one priority, and then being able to stay in there because you can pay your bills, and energy bills are massive. And I think Mr. Porter said that this 42 will be taken from the developer's allocation of social housing. The other thing, will they all be in one place, or will these properties be scattered? So will we have an area of social housing within a private development, and hopefully shared facilities in terms of playgrounds? But it's fabulous news, so well done everybody involved. But
again, it kind of covers all three of our areas here, so I'll start. In terms of disability accessible properties, we try to build with a home for life approach. So in relation to what we do, we try and ensure that the homes that we're building can be easily adapted, so that if residents do develop needs, then those homes can be easily adapted and changed, so that you don't have the life disruption relating to that. in relation to how we are, or the units that we're looking at currently, I think we saw 2 of the disability full access units when we did the site visit last week. Yep. So yes, on that front, we are ensuring that we get the right mix of accessible units, and we're also promoting the Home for Life approach across all building because it just makes sense. Obviously, we've got adaptations funds that can work to help within the private sector and also within our own housing. But when you're choosing to build literally from the ground up, ensuring that a property remains accessible and is accessible is just the logical thing to do. Energy efficiency wise, again, in terms of our own developments, that is something that we prioritise. So if I think back to King Street, we specifically included underfloor heating so that you've got a preventative measure there in terms of heating the entire building, and we do incorporate as many measures as we can. It's slightly different within the private market because developers can choose what they adopt as energy saving measures, but again, the approach that we take and the priorities that we have, again, will be reflected in the projects that we choose to look at. So I'm hoping that this is part of a system-wide change in that sense. I have now forgotten what the final question was.
I think you've answered everything. And the last one would be, probably to Mr. Porter, the right to buy. How many houses do we lose annually, maybe, through right to buy? So is there a net loss?
It was 3
I
for
can't
last
give you the
year.
exact numbers. We're projecting less this year than last year. Obviously, the environment for home buyers is quite difficult and challenging at the moment, so we are projecting the right to buy numbers to fall. Government have just recently relaxed some of the restrictions on right to buy receipts. So previously, a proportion of right to buy seats was taken by central government, and at least for this year and next year, government are allowing councils to retain that and put that money into their new build programme. In terms of numbers, I think we're talking at the moment. I think we're projecting 3 for this year, and I think last year it was something like 15 or something like that. I could get the exact numbers for you.
I suppose my concern was a net loss. So we bring on 42, but we've sold 67. So
No. The sale numbers are much lower than that. I think there's 2 key things to say about the right to buy, though. Firstly is the whole business plan works on rent income, not capital value. So capital value is kind of irrelevant. What's important is how much rent we generate from those homes, because it's the rent that funds all of the services we're providing, and it's the rent that funds the borrowing for this programme. So a right to buy sale takes rent out of the plan. One of the positive things about the right to buy regulations, though, is a thing called the cost floor. If you've not heard of that, it gives us some protection, and it means that the sale value of any of our properties can't fall below what we've spent on it in the preceding period, which I think is 10 years, but it might be 15. I'm not certain, but it's either 10 or 15 years. So if it's a new dwelling, then the right to buy sale value after discount can't fall below what we paid for it.
Councillor Faruqi.
Thank you. This is amazing news, and thank you. And your passion for the project really shows. I just wanted to talk about what we're considering affordable. I just wanted some reassurance that, given the cost of living crisis and the way that inflation is happening, that I appreciate it may not help with our deficit year on year, but are we willing to readjust what we consider affordable year on year for the people who will take up these houses? And also, are we thinking about affordability a little bit more holistically, not just in terms of energy, as we've talked about, in terms of insulation, to try and keep those bills down, and also in terms of things like access to broadband to avoid the digital divide, and those sorts of infrastructures being put in place for the people who will take on these homes? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to go again. So, in relation to affordable rent, it's why you might notice I tend to refer a lot to genuinely affordable rent, because I don't believe that the central government definition of affordable rent is actually affordable. Our rents are either at or below local housing allowance rates, which means that if you are relying on benefits, then your rent will be covered by the local housing allowance, which at the moment is extraordinarily low, unfortunately. So these are, in every sense, genuinely affordable. I'm happy to pass over to Mr. Porter for exact rates on that front. I know that our 3 beds are slightly below currently.
Yeah, I can't tell you the exact rates off the top of my head. That was a challenge, wasn't it? But they are on our website. So, yeah, the local housing allowance rates for 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom units are on the council's website. So if you can't find it, I'm more than happy to send you the link. Just on Wi-Fi, so the homes will be fibre connected. Obviously, the resident will need to pay their data costs, but they will be connected. Yeah.
On the insulation front, also, I'd like to refer back to the King Street development, because we had paper insulation within that, so it was both ecologically sound but also very important in terms of energy efficiency. So, thank you.
Councillor Bright.
I think I'm just going to echo what everyone said about this being brilliant, and I was very proud to support it last week. Councillor Faruqi just asked one of my 2 questions around affordability, so thank you for that, and really encouraged to hear that answer. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer my second question, because it's a bit kind of nebulous, but obviously any of this building and any additional supply of housing for those in need eats into that 1,604 people in need or in temporary accommodation, which is brilliant. And you've costed it up brilliantly with the direct costs over the years. But obviously people in need have indirect costs. So there are indirect costs on the NHS because people have mental health issues. There are economic costs of lower educational outcomes. Have we done any kind of broader study as to the indirect costs of unaffordable housing on the NHS, on mental health and on educational outcomes in Thanet?
So in terms of health and education outcomes, that would usually fall under KCC, who I know have looked into that in various ways. In terms of housing, I think a good demonstration of that would be the cost of temporary accommodation as compared to the cost of what we're trying to do now, in that through not being able to house people within our portfolio, we are accumulating extraordinary costs. So I think it was 2.2 million last year in relation to paying for temporary accommodation that is often out of area, when that is funding that could effectively be going back into our housing. It's one of those very difficult areas to juggle because it comes from different funds, not to get too weird about it, but looking at things in a holistic manner and looking at the impact that no housing or poor housing has on people is a crucial part of this discussion. I say a lot that if we get housing right, everything else tends to fall into place, because I strongly believe that it does, both in terms of health outcomes and educational outcomes and general quality of life for residents. And it's, to me, very important to break this cycle of having to respond to an urgent situation such as eviction, therefore temporary housing out of area which isn't suitable, and then we're losing families' connections, losing jobs, losing education, and instead try and move to a model that sustains itself and allows us to keep residents here and to give them a lifestyle that is sustainable long term. There are interim methods that we can do that, so looking to expand our in-house temporary housing provision that was started with Foy House, because then when we do have these emergency situations, there is a way to manage it. But the long-term strategy has to be to provide for genuinely affordable accommodation. It reduces displacement, it hopefully prevents displacement, and it improves outcomes across all fronts. So, yeah, I'm extraordinarily passionate about it because I think so many of the issues that our residents face can be solved by taking this approach. Thank you.
I think we can tell. Thank you.
Councillor Packman.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just a quick one really about long-term tenancy management of these residents moving into these properties, because some of these residents or tenants won't have managed a tenancy maybe before, or had to pay rent on time before, or manage bills. Is there a holistic approach here from the council around tenancy management?
We have an extraordinary team on that front, and I think that's evidenced by the fact that even in spite of the current financial conditions, our rent arrears fell last year because we've got teams who are actively supporting residents to help them maintain tenancies and to help them when they are struggling in terms of rental costs. For those residents who are a bit more vulnerable and maybe haven't maintained a tenancy before, or who are coming from a long-term background of homelessness, that's where the RISE team are brilliant, because they can provide that level of intervention and support and modelling for how to maintain a tenancy and provide ongoing support for those who might just need a little bit more. But yeah, we've got very committed teams who do exactly that. Thank you.
Any more questions or comments from members?
I just had a quick comment
sorry,
to that,
Bob.
just on to that last question. We do routinely bring a performance report from the tenant and leaseholder services here on its way to cabinet, and the head of tenants and leaseholder services, Sally O'Sullivan, attends to present that. And amongst other things, it looks at the work of the financial wellbeing team that are responsible for supporting our tenants to access the incomes and benefits they're entitled to help access any support that's available for them, and as well as obviously collecting our own rent income, which is so important to the business plan. So there will be periodically an opportunity to dig into the detail of that here.
Okay, members, obviously this will now go forward to Cabinet. Is there any recommendations we'd like to make, or are we happy with the report? We're all happy with the report, excellent. So can we all please agree to note the report? Agree, thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 6, also again about housing, the local authority housing, the purchase of 9 homes. Again, to present the report, Mr. Porter.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not going to repeat all of the stuff I said on the last report, because this is broadly the same principle. So it's part of that programme as well, with the same principle that, 60%-ish of the cost comes from borrowing in the HRA and the remaining comes from subsidy. I think probably what is important to say about this particular report is that the subsidy in this case is coming from central government, from DLUC, and it came in the form of an allocated grant. We didn't actually bid for it. It was allocated to the district, 1.19 million, and that grant is to support local councils to purchase homes that will be used in the first instance for families from Ukraine or Afghanistan, and for as long as that need is required. And then in the longer term, they form part of our normal housing stock and will be let in line with the council's allocations policy. I think the other thing to say about this particular scheme, in contrast to Spitfire Green, is that with Spitfire Green, where there's a year 1 deficit in the cash flow, with this scheme, there is no deficit in year one for cash flow. The cash flow is in surplus right from the start. Oddly, doing this enables us to do even more of these projects subsequently. And so I think that's all I want to say by introduction.
Yeah, happy to come in. Yes, I'm very glad to express my full support for the usage of the Local Authority Housing Fund within our larger programme of genuinely affordable housing production. The resettlement of refugees from both Ukraine and Afghanistan has, in many ways, lacked the central focus that good support required. To my mind, full funding needed to have been given to councils with statutory housing obligations to provide for refugees in a way that could provide reliable housing and support those who have experienced war and disruption. Often, especially in the case of resettlement schemes linked to Afghanistan, those who provided support to British forces and need our support now. This lack of a foundational approach has proved difficult for many councils to manage, as it's often resulted in complex homelessness cases and the use of accommodation that I would consider to be unsuitable to provide for individuals and families whilst they're under the care of the Home Office. This fund goes some way towards remedying this. The Local Authority Housing Support Fund has been created to enable local authorities to purchase properties in their area to accommodate both Ukrainian and Afghan refugee households for an initial period of 3 years. As a council, we do our best to house those who are most vulnerable, and we do well in discharging that duty and will continue to do so. We have 3,470 properties within our housing portfolio, all general needs housing, all used by residents who have been on our housing list. What is proposed here, relating to the very specific requirements of a particular governmental fund, is the purchase of 9 homes, or roughly 0.25% of our overall housing portfolio, all of which will eventually become general needs housing for the current usage of refugees from both the Ukraine and Afghanistan who have arrived here as part of government-led schemes. To my mind, there are 2 main issues to consider in relation to this item, and they're both interlinked. As human beings and as a council, we have a moral duty to do our best to support those in need and those who are vulnerable. This grant, partial though it is, supports us to fulfil that duty and to provide for individuals who are protected within our Equalities Act commitments. Secondly, the fund also supports the growth of our housing portfolio in general, which allows us to support all residents in the long term. Due to the grant, as Mr Porter said, these homes will already be helping to support the purchase and creation of new homes from the point of purchase via rent contributions. As we've discussed, I'm especially aware of the issues surrounding rent inflation in Thanet and the need for social housing, as evidenced over many years of council debates now, and our ongoing and future build and acquisition plans reflect this general need. Our ambitious social and affordable rent programme, aiming to deliver over 400 affordable homes in the next 4 years, previously discussed tonight, reflects this. However, provision for one, in this case, is provision for all, and is a significant contribution to our housing infrastructure, and it is important to consider the full scope of both the fund and our contribution to it, in both a moral and a financial sense. I would like to thank Housing wholeheartedly for all their work relating to this project, and as before, I'm happy to answer any questions alongside Mr Porter.
Okay, members, you got any comments or questions? Councillor Bright.
Hello again. Again, I'm really supportive of this, and I have 2 questions really. The first is around the families themselves. Obviously, these are people from Afghanistan and Ukraine. They've been through an incredibly traumatic sort of last 2 or 3 years, and the adults and the children alike that come to these houses and that take up residence in these houses are going to have had some incredibly awful experiences that I hope none of us ever have to go through ourselves. Are we supplying support to them in terms of mental health support and just sort of general kind of help to get them up and running again, sort of spiritually as well as sort of, you know, giving them a house? Do we give them the support they need? That'd be my first question. My second question would be about their status as well. You know, people that come, particularly, you know, I work with people from Eastern Europe, and, you know, they're so much like us. It's incredible, and they want to work, and they're professional people. Are they able to work, or are they in a kind of what status do they have in terms of being able to make a contribution that I know they would want to?
I'll come in with what I know to start with, if that makes sense. And obviously, it's a fairly surface level answer in relation to me, but relating to health and social care, again, there are particular funds within Kent County Council that help to provide support on that level. So that would cross more into that particular area. Relating to status, as these individuals have come through resettlement schemes, to my knowledge, there's no restriction in relating to work. So this is very much a community-based approach. In terms of the details of how we're identifying individuals and any support that we can offer, I'd like to pass over to Mr. Porter and
yeah, so there is quite a lot of money for support services. Together with the county, we've worked with the we've worked with the South East Council for Migration and with Migrant Helpline, and some of those support services are commissioned directly by the county, including welcoming people when they first arrive, providing financial support and support with, you know, setting up their home, support with any training, education needs they may have. Absolutely, yeah, comes with the right to work. Obviously, that once the Home Office have determined their application, they would have the right to work in the economy. In terms of identifying people, there are a number of different routes that people can use. So in terms of Ukraine, there were two primary routes. The Homes for Ukraine route, which you probably all remember, the government called out for people to offer up spare rooms in their home and sponsor a Ukrainian refugee. So that was one route into the country, and the other one was the Ukrainian Families Scheme, where Ukrainian nationals needed to have a member of their extended family already living in the area, effectively saying they could go and stay with them. In either of those, we've got people in both of those sets of circumstances in the district that are either living with Thanet-based families that offered a room up or had extended family in the district, and obviously they would be, if they're in housing difficulties, they would be eligible for these projects. The Afghan scheme was primarily around people that had supported the British forces in Afghanistan and were offered the opportunity to apply for a refugee status in the UK. So, and again, we've got some of those cases in the district that may need support with their housing and would be eligible for these homes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Austin.
Thank you. I just want to say, before there was any support, when we very first had Ukrainian refugees coming over, we set up through Ramsgate Town Council a support group which used to meet. Now it doesn't because everybody's working and whatever, but there is a WhatsApp group, all in Ukrainian. I get it on my phone. I don't understand a word of it apart from when there's a poster of something in English. But there is, if anybody comes across Ukrainian individuals or families who are lacking in information or links with other Ukrainian people in Thanet, do let us know because we can put them in touch. And it's a phenomenally useful group. They've managed to do so much themselves to support each other. It's brilliant.
Excellent. Right, Councillor Cup.
Just,
sorry,
sorry,
did you
just
want to
to
come back?
add a comment to that, and thank you. That's really helpful. That group is actually organised by one of our own employees, who is a Ukrainian national herself, and we recruited her specifically as a Ukrainian family support worker with some of the money that came from KCC. You know, having her in the staff is really, you know, it's really helpful because it can really help us build some relationships with those families and support those families.
We're delighted that you took her on, and she's been fabulous.
Excellent. Councillor Cup, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. And once again, this is a really good scheme, and I think that this is really important that we're supporting those in need. My concern is around, and I don't know, Councillor Whitehead, if you have received any emails from residents, but often when, unfortunately, something like this happens or is put into the public realm, people turn around and go, oh, well, what about us? You know, we've still on the housing list and everything like that. And I think that it's important to ensure that when press releases are going out there, just obviously saying how important it is that we are supporting these people, because it absolutely is, but also that in actual fact, by allowing us to do this, it is also ensuring that we are putting provisions in place for our own housing stock as well and supporting our own residents. And I apologise, it's not really much of a question, but more of a kind of a general kind of ask, I suppose. But when it comes to press releases and things like that around this, I think that we've just got to be really robust in, or ask you if we could be really robust in being really clear on what this policy is and actually try and take it away from those that are just going to put on the rhetoric that, oh, what about us? Because I think, you know, unfortunately they don't understand the policy in its full length. And I think it's really important that we as a council remain robust on why we're committed to this kind of policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. There's quite a few factors relating to this. To my mind, this is part of our overall strategy in terms of delivering genuinely affordable housing. As I said before, it's just over 0.25% of our housing stock, which is a very small amount, and it's also working towards delivering further housing from the moment we purchase it, effectively. The conditions around this were very much because the expression of interest went in quite a while ago. Under the previous administration, we have to work to the timeframes given by that fund. So to ensure transparency within the council, we have to make sure that things are published for the right meetings in time for us to actually be able to access the fund so that we can support people. As I said, as far as I'm concerned, this is part of us providing for all of our community. And I do fully understand the stresses that people are under, and I receive many, many emails a day from residents who are extraordinarily concerned about their housing situation or in desperate situations often. But I try and think of it in terms of what I would want and how I would want my son to be treated if we ended up in the same circumstances. I would want to believe that other countries would welcome him. I would want to believe that there would be a home for us. And I think people understanding the human aspect of this is really important, because people can choose to report on things in any way they wish to, and unfortunately negative reports often move faster than positive. But we all have a choice in how we interpret them, and we can choose to look at another person in need and recognise that need and recognise our mutual humanity, or we can choose to look at it in terms of they have something that I want or they have something that I don't have. To my mind, what these individuals have is experience of a trauma that I don't want to imagine. And the least we can do is to try and support them to settle in a place where I hope they will be safe and where I hope they will be cared for by all of our community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think we all share that sentiment. Who else indicated? Councillor Davis.
Yeah, again, I'd like to echo how welcome this scheme is and how important it is, obviously. There's just one issue I'd like some clarification on, is why it has, quote, an initial period of 3 years. These people are in need of housing. Are they not being given the same permanent facility and security as a normal tenancy? What happens in 3 years? You're surely not suggesting that we say to them, okay, off you go. The vulnerability, particularly with the Afghans, is still going to be here, isn't it? So isn't it a little bit disingenuous to say, oh yeah, but it'll come into the housing stock? It is either in the housing stock from day one or it isn't.
Yeah, so the wording there comes from the actual fund, which is a bit depressing, to be honest. So it's worded that way simply because that's how the fund is phrased. We wouldn't want anyone to feel that they have a secondary tenancy. Yes. I'm happy to pass over to Mr. Porter, but we wouldn't want anyone to feel that they weren't. Yeah. Yeah, it's the fund. Thank you.
I went to some of the seminars about this actually, and there was a lot of questions from a lot of councils about the duration and the tenancies, and frankly, government didn't know the answer to any of those questions. We've got tenancies policy that only provides for two types of tenancies. So one is a licence for people that we've got statutory homeless duty to, whilst they're in temporary accommodation and waiting for a permanent home, and the other one is a lifetime secure tenancy. So depending on the way that the family apply, it will be either one of those.
So either could apply in this instance, then it could be that they're on a licence, so they are in effect temporary. Okay, no, thank you.
It'll be one of those because they're the only two sorts of tenancy that we offer.
Right, smashing, thank you. Thanks for clearing that.
Anybody? Councillor Wynne.
I just need to follow on because obviously we worked quite closely with the Ukrainians, but I mean I welcome this, but it's just a sad fact that this country chooses to deal with migrants in two very distinct ways, and I'd call them a system of apartheid, if you like. Some people are treated differently, and I think we mustn't forget that the reason we don't have a social housing stock is because we've been starved of funding for too many years, and we have a present political system that prefers to spend money housing people in boats offshore rather than invest in people. So I thank you for this, but I think it's just a shame that immigrants are treated in so starkly different ways, which is out of our control, but I do welcome the fact we are at least trying to do the decent thing to support two groups of vulnerable people.
Yeah, I know I speak about it a lot, but the way that things are funded or not funded in the case of housing frequently means that the provision that's been offered has often been very piecemeal. So in taking up this fund, it feels like, again, a more foundational approach to actually providing. It feels as if it's something that can actually create home and community rather than it being, we will simply find a way to accommodate. It's something that I struggle with personally because the lack of stock means that we can't provide in the way that other countries do because we simply don't have the stock to simply go, this is how we're going to deal with it. But I hope that this brings us a step closer to providing the community and home that people need.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up there. So again, this report has to go to Cabinet next week. So any recommendations that we want to make? We're all happy with the report. We're all happy to note the report. Okay, thank you. Okay, right, moving on. I'm a bit conscious of time and that officers are giving up their evening to be with us this evening. So I'm going to move item number 9 forward And so item number 9, Levelling Up Fund and the Margate Town Deal projects update. So I know members remember from the work programme when we talked about subjects to scrutinise, and a lot of it came around the Levelling Up Fund. So we've asked the officers to come and give us a full update on all the projects that are going on in Thanet. So I'll call on Ms Askew to bring the report.
Evening, thank you for your invite. So I think the request was to particularly pick up projects within the Town Deal and Levelling Up Fund programmes by way of an update. So I wanted to start by just sharing a slide, and we've shared this often with staff and in our members' briefings, which highlights some of the funding that's been awarded and allocated over the last few years in terms of our regeneration programme. And I've highlighted Margate Town Deal and Ramsgate Levelling Up Fund more for the newer members so that they can see how much funding has been allocated to those programmes, and they were the two that I was going to focus on particularly this evening. Within those two programmes is about 20 individual projects, so it's quite a lot. I probably will, some might have more detail in terms of my update, just because there's a lot to get through. Just for a bit of context, within the team that looks after Ramsgate projects, we have a project manager, a project assistant manager, and an apprentice project assistant manager. And then in Margate, we specifically have one project manager, and then we have two as a general regeneration project manager, and then we have two specific project officers working, one on the Theatre Royal and one on our coastal wellbeing activities for the Town Deal. So we're a really small team, and this is some of the funding that we've been working within most recently. So Levelling Up and Town Deal were two quite different processes. The Town Deal was an allocation. We were one of 101 places to put together an investment plan. The Levelling Up Funds was a competitive bidding process that we were successfully awarded the 19.8 million for. They have different processes in terms of management and reporting, but all up to central government. So how do we share updates? I think that was one of the requests as part of attending this meeting, was to help members feel up to date and have more information about the projects. So we've got our council web pages. I think we nearly broke our website because we were given campaign pages to put Town Deal and Levelling Up information on, and we've had to redo those and move them into the main content of our website so that we make sure we can keep adding the information on there. So we've done a recent update following the event this week on the Ramsgate projects, and we are busy working on updates for the Margate Town Deal. We have our Wave newsletter. We have the Loop, which is for our members. Colin Carmichael does a fortnightly update to members, and we use that to provide information to all members. We have press releases to our media partners, and we respond to press inquiries. We have regular members updates. So we more recently provided an update for members on the UK Share Prosperity Fund. Prior to the election, we did, I think we did a Ramsgate, a Margate and a Ramsgate. So we're quite often, you'll quite often see my face at a members update. We have stakeholder lists and groups, and as those that attended Ramsgate this week will have seen, we've started to try and do a bit more engagement activity through events. Also some pictures of the event, and we felt that it was important that we were actually in the centre of the harbour, and you may see some of yourselves there. We were really pleased to have seen so many members come along and look at the information that we were providing and ask questions of our project management and design teams on the day. So this is a slide we've used a lot. I know it's quite a busy one, but it is, this information is on our website, but essentially it shows the 3 different key interventions around the Port of Ramsgate. One around Greenport, and that's predominantly about that bigger growth in economic opportunity. One around our inclusive harbour, so that's how can we make better use of some of the assets we have in and around the harbour. And then the last one is around assets within our community that we can help to build on, to encourage some of our communities to engage more in these regeneration programmes. The basis of the Levelling Up Fund and the Margate Town deal is about job creation, growth and providing opportunities for young people. We know that in Ramsgate there was no job growth in 10 years and that can't happen. So that was the driving force behind many of these. So if you were at the event on Thursday, you will have seen some of these images, and I understand that the artist's impression of the cargo ship in the middle of the port provided quite a lot of debate. It's just an image and is definitely not to scale, so it wouldn't be in our port. But this just shows you some of the work that we're doing with Border Force, and I appreciate it's tricky to see probably with the lights on here, but this is on our website. So it's easy for you to have a look at. But this shows the work that we're doing with Border Force. So we've got a design team on board. They're working directly with Border Force as a stakeholder to make sure that we have the right things on the ground in terms of what they need. And then we're working separately around the specification for the mooring spine and the berth, to make sure that they are suitable and fit for purpose as part of the debate that we've already heard this evening. So this is an image of the Green Campus. We have Yankatane Architects on board. They are currently at REBA Stage 1. This has a great opportunity for growth. It's a modular building. We're working with stakeholders, be it education providers, organisations working within the hydrogen industry, and also our customers at the Port of Ramsgate, including offshore wind farm operators, and others that we know have training and skills requirements in the maritime industry. We quite often talk about the kind of decarbonisation of the sector and thinking more broadly what things we can learn from other places, and the team are visiting a block site tomorrow, and we've been talking to lots of different organisations about how they've worked. We've also visited Ostend, who has a similar sort of complex, albeit theirs is university-led. But we have a broad stakeholder group involved in this, and we're trying to create a space that allows organisations to grow and engage with the sector as well. And there are some further plans that look at how, if funding and or investment comes forward, this could grow within the space around it. This is just a drawing of the fishing facility. There was some further, and this is again on our website. We, at a previous members briefing, I think we talked about an application that we submitted to the Seafood Infrastructure Fund, which was unfortunately unsuccessful, that would have given us greater scope and opportunity for this site. We understand that the fishermen could make greater value from their catch if it can be processed on site, rather than it travelling to somewhere else before it ends up on a plate, and therefore reducing its miles. One of the things that we've been working with the Thanet Fishermen's Association is thinking about how we can improve that opportunity for the boats within our harbour to support those fishermen to be able to recruit and grow the sector. It's been challenging. I think with all of the programmes, any capital investment, whether it be across housing, levelling up Town Deal, Future High Street Fund, we are being faced with unprecedented inflationary costs, and I think that was mentioned earlier. We are also impacted from being a round one bid on the increase in labour costs and material costs due to the challenges we've been facing from leaving the EU and the war in Ukraine. So it's had a massive impact, and we are working with our broad project management team, ACOM, who we've brought on to support the team, and our cost consultants to really evidence that and lobby central government. And I think Councillor Manners talked about are we speaking to central government and the Secretary of State, and that is something that we are doing, because there are absolutely challenges, and we do not want to temper our ambition around delivery because of those, and we are looking at every opportunity either for other sources of funding or other sources of funding, or how we can value engineer the delivery to reduce it down, but with the potential for further growth or making sites bigger should funding come forward. So we've got a design team called Pascal and Watson working with us on this, and we have looked to move the site in the harbour to make it more suitable for the fishermen on the basis that we didn't get that broader funding that we had applied for. So I'm going to move on to the Clock House and Pier Yard. The architect team working with us I know it's really tricky to see on here, but as I said, again, this is on our website. We are looking at extending on the ground floor and out to create a food and beverage offer that will help support and sustain the operation within the museum. We are working with the Ramsgate Society and other key stakeholders in developing a plan for the future to ensure that it is a sustainable operation, and we have a successful expression of interest through the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and we are applying for a development grant in the August deadline. So National Lottery Heritage Fund is a two-stage process. You submit a development grant, and then you submit a full grant 9 to 12 months later. And one of the opportunities that we have is the funding within the Levelling Up Fund to provide match funding. And we've been working very closely with Historic England and our internal conservation officer to make sure that what we deliver is in keeping with the building and the site. For those that don't know, the Royal Harbour has now got an overall listing of being Grade 2 star listed. It had 3 or 4 different individual sites around the harbour were listed, but there were bits missing in between. The whole of the harbour is. So that obviously has an impact in the way that we develop our schemes and put proposals forward. This also links in with the opportunity around Pier Yard, and we are scoping how that would work as a public space, being mindful that we require access into for the fishing fleet, and also up to the brasserie. And we've been working with Kent County Council Highways to think about whether there's an opportunity to move the road and access for the brasserie at the end of the pier as part of that development. As I said, in terms of the inflationary pressures, the challenge that provides for listed buildings is huge. With new builds, you can value engineer it by making it smaller. With listed structures, that's really difficult to do. You cannot compromise on the materials or the quality of design because it's, we can't do that to our heritage assets. So it is proving to be a challenge for these, although we are benefiting from the fact that the Clock House is applying for National Lottery Heritage Fund. The Smack Boys, which the proposal is for a restaurant with rooms, because apparently boutique hotels are out. We have had a number of conversations with independent operators, because it's a relatively small site and would be more appealing to the independents than chains. And the challenge in terms of the funding gap is not insignificant in terms of that development. So we're doing quite a lot of work at the moment, working with our architects to see what the kind of art of the possible is within that building, because we don't want to lose the opportunity that we've got with the Levelling Up Fund. So that one is going to be a slightly trickier proposal bringing forward, particularly because of the inflationary pressure, and which is partly why we are trying to engage with the Secretary of State and the department. So we've got 2 access to opportunity schemes. As I said, these are about providing, sorry, I should go back and say the Levelling Up Fund is all capital investment. It's about buildings, it's about land. There isn't any revenue funding allocated with this programme. That's the way it was set out by central government. So this is about creating buildings where we can deliver programmes of activity, and we are looking to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund to help us deliver some of that. And this is the Future High Street Fund scheme, and as part of that being delivered in Broad Street, as part of that we're delivering the town centre access to opportunities site. And then, as the leader mentioned, this is the Newington Community Centre, and I think one that the team are actually really excited about delivering, because we can see very, very quickly the communities and the organisation being able to take advantage of this and link up with the jobs that we are planning on creating through the kind of food and beverage opportunities. So it's a development of a kitchen, but we are looking at the green spaces around and trying to improve the building. We are working with Architects Yankatane, who are particularly good at looking at spaces in a creative and engaging way. So we're quite excited about that opportunity. So they're all the, and this is a real whistle stop through these. So this slide is another one that kind of showcases the Margate Town deal. I appreciate it is very busy. We have a number of key interventions across the 22.2 million. Scaling Margate's creative production and skills. One of the things that we know is the creative sector is growing, but it is incredibly challenged by land and buildings. And we have seen some very good organisations really struggle with private landlords. So through the Town Investment Plan, we have set up a creative land trust. It is an independent organisation, has a number of trustees. They have recruited an executive director and a community engagement and communications manager and they've both recently started. The Trust have put together a property subgroup and are working through a long list of potential sites and assets and putting that through a kind of criteria for investment. They've also been working with the creative sector to understand what the need is, what kind of spaces they need, and it's about safeguarding and holding properties in perpetuity, but also by supporting the sector more broadly by providing advice and guidance from the capacity that they gain with delivering it themselves. As part of this, sorry, I'm going to have a drink. Part of this intervention includes the Theatre Royal. It is an asset that the council owns, and we have, as part of that, employed a specialist project manager who will be putting together, or who is working on, an updated vision. She's putting together a National Lottery Heritage Fund expression of interest, and we are hoping to submit a development grant application in the new year. I think I read somewhere somebody said, why couldn't we just submit it tomorrow? And if only we could. We're working really hard with a number of organisations across Thanet to make sure that we don't put more than one Thanet bid into a round, because if we do, then they become in competition with each other. And there are only 4 application dates across the year. So we don't want to be competing. I don't want to have 2 Theatre Royal and a Clockhouse project competing with each other. We want them to stand out on their own. So we're putting that together at the moment. We have done a lot of work around surveys, structural surveys. We are developing a vision, and we are going to complete some urgent minor works to the roof to help safeguard the interior of the building. One of the benefits that we have for the Theatre Royal this time round, where we've tried before, is £2 million grant funding to act as match, which has always been a challenge before. The project includes a Theatre Royal and 19 Hawley Square, and the point about having 19 Hawley is to provide some sustainability for the theatre moving forward. We've recently had some Theatres Trust funding, just £10,000, but that's helping us test the business case for the future of that. We also have a programme of outreach, education, engagement, and that's some of the limited revenue funding as part of this. Again, the majority of central government funding that has come out has been capital, which is great because Thanet has not benefited from kind of regeneration capital funding for a long time because of the way programmes were directed, but also the impact in cutting funding to local authorities has meant that there are challenges around revenue funding. But the Margate Town Deal Board was particularly keen on working out how, both with the creative industries, but also around health and well-being, how we can engage with our communities and make them part of this, thinking about how we can show people that jobs within the creative industry are not just for artists and what other opportunities they are available, and it's not just for art galleries. Coastal well-being. Oh, I've started talking, and sorry, I realise I've got some images here. Coastal wellbeing includes a number of different projects around the kind of Walpole Bay area within Cliftonville West. So there are improvements. We've got match funding for improvements to the tidal pool with the Environment Agency, and we're working with our technical services team on that. We are developing a site to test uses. One of the proposals that came forward for the town deal was to sort out the Lido site, and we were only allowed to bid for 25 million, and I don't think we would have enough to do that and the other things in the town as part of that funding. So we are looking at a way of testing uses around health and well-being and coastal activities to showcase that the businesses can develop and grow, and there might be further opportunities for sites like the Lido in the future. There are a number of sites across the top of at the front at Cliftonville, so the Oval, Bandstand and Lawns refurbishment, and the development of a skate park next to the play park in Cliftonville. We are also improving access to the bay through investment in the lift and the stairs. We know that there's a number of older people's homes in that area, and they struggle to get down with the lift not working. So we are thinking about how we draw together all of those activities at Walpole Bay, and we know it's a busy, it's a growing beach. When I first started doing this, nobody went to Walpole Bay, and it was fine that there were no facilities there. It's now not, and we're pushing forward on that investment to help do that. And we've got a design team working with us to put that together. We have internal stakeholder groups and external. One of the other interventions was active movement and connections, and I don't have any pretty pictures to show for that at the moment, but the ambition is around how do we move people more easily between Margate and Cliftonville around our coastline and through our town centres. We've got some wayfinding activity as part of that, and a toilet provision in Margate, which we are talking about bringing forward. We recently met with the County Council to talk about the highway scheme. We are definitely not highway experts, but they are being really supportive in thinking about how we can propose those schemes to the next stage, where we will have to do some significant engagement, because highways is always controversial in terms of changes. Some people like new schemes and others don't. The last intervention is diversifying our heritage assets. So we have two investments. One is for Destination Dreamland, which is mainly focused at the cinema complex. Essentially, it is an investment to unlock further private investment, which was a significant requirement for town deal areas. And it's about the unlocking that heritage deficit, which is something Historic England talk a lot about, and the challenge that we've always had and coastal resorts have is these big heritage assets are not fit for purpose in this current time, and this 4 million investment should help to unlock that. We're about to add some information onto the website about the programme with an updated kind of timeline, and we are talking to Dreamland about their the grant agreement and commissioning the specifics around that. And then the Winter Gardens. So we had a smaller amount of revenue funding to complete a number of surveys. We've got quite a lot of information online already about the surveys, structural surveys, building, electrical, mechanical conditions, legal reviews, site surveys, asbestos, drainage, you name it, we've done them. We have an updated FAQ section on the website because we know there's a lot of love and interest for this building. The image on the right is, and you can't see it particularly well here, but it forms part of the evening and nighttime economy review that we've done, and the specifics around the Winter Gardens shows the different stages of different parts of the Winter Gardens as they were built. And it's fascinating when you pair it back to think about what the original building looked like and what the opportunities and scope might be for the future of that. We've just finished a commission to bring in an agency to support taking it out, a marketing agency, to support taking it out to the market and testing what the opportunity and uses might be with the broader private sector. So I think, yes, that's my last slide. Sorry, I know I talked really quickly, but I wanted to try and get through those this evening.
Thank you, Ms Askey. That's an excellent presentation. I think we all agree. So, members, questions? All hands up. Councillor Curry, you were first.
Well, thanks, Louise, for your presentation. I know it's big projects and you've got a fairly small team. There's an awful lot of work in there. What I'd like to ask is, I know you're at a stage now where you can give a presentation like this and we can take this back to the public. There isn't a great deal to take back to the public at the moment because the projects are such an early stage. But what I would ask is, when the time's right, would you arrange some community engagement meetings so we can really bring the public in and keep them updated on the projects, particularly the coastal wellbeing project. But I think it's one of those projects where community engagement is really important, and we've got a lot of people in the area that would really like to know exactly maybe a rough timeline, because there's a lot of people think everything will be built sort of next year, when in effect there's I think it's 2026 for these projects to be delivered. Thank you.
Thanks, yes. The team really want to do some community engagement activities. The one that we did at the Turner Contemporary was really well received, and it was a very early stage as we had just submitted, or we were just submitting the investment plan. So they're really keen. What we don't want to do is turn up with nothing. People like, as they did in Ramsgate, like to be able to see, even to critique, to say, well, actually, I think, it could look a bit like this, or we might want something, have you thought about doing this? So it's really good to be able to do that, but we are really keen, and the project officer that's involved in the coastal wellbeing activities is out there talking to stakeholders all the time, putting people together, creating different opportunities. So there is definitely something that we can do more of. We're trying to put some timelines together now to think about what are the key next steps moving forward, and that information will go online, and as part of that there will be some more engagement.
I'd just like to say also thanks for meeting with Cliftonville West councillors, and I know you've met other councillors as well, because that was really useful. Thanks.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation, Louise. I'm going to try and sort of précis some questions here, because obviously, again, there's a lot of different issues on the different projects and so on. You referred to them being at a very early stage, and I've noticed that in some of the forward plan stuff, for instance, with regard to, there's a phrase about early engagement with the green energy sector, and the budget for that isn't even until next year. So I'd question the phrase early engagement. A lot of people are asking why we're still at this incredibly early stage 2 years after the grant was announced. And it would be good to know why, because a lot of people, and I think it's justified, would expect there to be a lot more meat in these. Another observation, by the way, is that on the visuals that were used in the public consultation the other day, Brett's has magically doubled in size. Now, there's delegated authority to the Chief Executive to negotiate and explore expansion of Brett's, but there's a lot of issues that we have with lack of enforcement on their environmental breaches and so on, and I think it's predetermination and certainly assumptive to show them as twice the size on documents that are being produced to the public, particularly given that there's argument about whether it's necessary or not. There's clearly an agenda there, because there's a video from 2016 talking about Brett's expanding. Now, it keeps being denied, and I think that's something that again, we'd like some clarity on. But anyway, sorry, I'll come back.
Thanks. We're already engaging with the green energy sector, and in particular, we're working with the Thames Estuary Growth Board, and they've got some specialists in that, and thinking about their support in unlocking investment or engagement with other organisations. There's quite a lot happening already. Why we're here, we're 2 years down the line. When we submitted the bid, we were 2 people in regeneration, and we have been growing slowly alongside the development and delivery of activities around the Margate Town deal. Ideally, we would be further along, but I think there was a report in the national press that showed 5% of LUF Round 1 programmes had only 5% have been delivering, because there's significant challenges that I outlined around the cost and inflationary pressures, and we are having to revisit everything because of that. So we've tooled up, as it were, in terms of the team. We've got a really good project management team in ACOM working us through to REBA Stage 3. We've got our design teams on board, and the activity in recent months has been huge, so I expect to see a lot more coming out in those. In terms of the images, I guess you're talking about this one. Brett's hasn't doubled in size. This is the scope of works in terms of what border force need, and where this forms not dissimilar to how the previous ferry operator managed the space. So we know how it works. It isn't about anything has doubled in size. It's just about this is where the operation works. The road, this is where it works for the road coming in from the roundabout, and for the flow of traffic in and around the port. So
the highlighted area is actually
that's the border force operations. Yeah, that's the border force operations.
Councillor Austin.
Thanks, Louise, and congratulations again on bringing in that massive amount of money into the area, and also on the event on Tuesday, which I think was really useful. I wanted to ask about how you're going to use the feedback that you're getting from that event, and whether we can all as councillors have a link to the survey so that we can all share it, please, with our residents, for those who didn't manage to get there. I wanted to ask about the road project in Ramsgate, the harbour parade and the main road bit, and where we are with that, because obviously that underpins some of the other stuff regarding the clock house and the potential to pedestrianise or change the way that all of that works round the harbour. And then picking up on Councillor Curry's point, and this is probably less a point for you, but more a point for our future work programme. Councillor Curry mentioned timelines, and I know when I suggested that we need something about our regeneration projects at every meeting, I wasn't suggesting that Louise should turn up at every meeting and do a presentation like this. That would be totally unreasonable. What I was looking at was we, as looking at the Birth 4 and 5 report has been mentioned earlier in the evening, and we've looked at what lessons we've learned, and about that we need to be sure we have a project management framework for everything we do. We need timelines. We need to look as a committee at, are we up to where we need to be with various projects? Are we up to the spend that we need to have made, etc., etc., etc.? That shouldn't need to involve Louise at every meeting, but it might need to involve a project manager or an individual or a consultant or whatever. But I do believe really strongly that this committee's role is to scrutinise that at every meeting so that we are on top of it, because this is a massive amount of money coming into our district. It has the potential to make a transformative difference, but we need to be on top of the process, not all the content, but the process. So that's not really a question to Louise. That's a comment with regard to where this sits. But I'd be interested in knowing about the feedback and about the roads, please.
Fab, thank you. So we actually had about 300 people through the doors on Tuesday, which is really good, and the team were really pleased with that. And all of the surveys went, which means people took them away, and some were returned on the day. We will absolutely share the link. We can do that, and I'll just check, because what we might want to do is put a deadline on that so that we can then use it for the next phase. So different parts of the information will be shared with the different design teams, and as a team we will have a look at a kind of overall report to make sure we're picking up and or using some of the information to create some FAQs for our website. And anyone that links in through the Your Voice Thanet can register to say they'd like an update. So when we put those FAQs online, we can then provide them that update directly. The Future High Street Fund Road, I think I need to check, but I think that's due to start in the autumn. Obviously, we can't do it in the summer, and we can't do it at Christmas, and we can't do it when the birds are nesting and the newts are crossing the road. So we have really tight timescales in terms of delivering road infrastructure in particular. So, but I think it's due to start in the autumn, yes. And I did want to just come back on your last point. One of the benefits of now having a bigger team with lots and lots of different skills is we are putting some more easy to use kind of timelines, and we have some very convoluted monitoring and evaluation returns for central government, and what we're trying to do is create a more simplified version within the council so that we can all use that much more easily. So there's a lot of work going behind the scenes on that, as well as managing it all.
Okay, so we've got Councillor Green next, then Councillor Wing, then Councillor Patman.
Yeah, thank you, Louise. You mentioned the need to find an operator for the Smack Boys project, but it's also true that the Cluckhouse, the Broad Street project, the Newington project, and also probably the fishing facility are all going to need operators going forward, which means they all need to be sustainable. How much work have you done to convince yourself that they are all sustainable?
Thank you. Yes, we are looking at what the different operator models are for each of them. In terms of the Broad Street and the Future High Street Fund project that has the access to opportunities, that formed part of the work we did to submit the bid for the Future High Street Fund, and we've commissioned a bit more work around updating that to help us understand. There is potential for crossover for a number of them, particularly the workspaces. So obviously we own the Kent Innovation Centre, the creative workspace in Ramsgate and the Green Campus have a real synergy around work and the opportunity to do more around education, linking with those. We've been working with the Thanet Fishermen's Association around the fishing facility, and there is more work to be done around thinking about how that would be run. And we are talking to our newly appointed head of property to think more broadly, are there any other opportunities linked with other sites that we've got? But that operator model is something that we are working on at the moment, to bring in some extra resource to make sure that each of those within those designs, and so there's a kind of joint relationship between the two, is does that design work for the operation, and that's a piece of work we're doing at the moment.
Councillor Wing.
Thank you. It's good to, thank you, Louise, because it's good to see the whole projects in a sense, and how, you know, I'm Ramsgate based, but it is good to get an idea, a sense of what's happening across our towns. I did go to the Theatre Royal, so, you know, we have some key things in both towns that are vitally important to us. I too went to the Luff thing, and in Ramsgate it was really well attended, and I did know where the crane shed was, and it was good to hear that people are thinking that the Sea Cadets might end up in the Green Hub, because that is a major concern, that we talk about opportunities for young people and then we throw them out of the Smack Boys and we don't find a home for them. So I welcome that we found the Sea Cadets a home, and it is near the sea. Also the High Street money and the road, Councillor Austin asked that question. Have we any idea of how that will relate to obviously access in and around the harbour and the port, which is extremely difficult, and we have a number of near misses when the tunnel is shut, and clearly the tunnel can't be shut if we have all this extra industry and vehicles moving in and out. So that is the responsibility of KCC, and I think they've got to do what they do with the Herne Bay bypass and do it at night, or put traffic lights in. When we talked about this before, I asked a question about how is the funding, and I specifically mentioned the 500,000 to the Oval Bandstand, the Newington, and also the 4 million that went to Dreamland. And the answer I got was retrospective funding, which I find really difficult. I managed a multi-million-pound project as a senior teacher in a school. We were a specialist sports college delivering across a metropolitan area, a big metropolitan area, and I led on that, and my funding was received once our application was successful a year in advance. So I got 1 year's funding, report at the end, very tough government reports to fill in, have to be really well evidenced. If you don't achieve an aim, you have to justify why you've not achieved that aim. It might go in a different direction, because these things, as they evolve, will go in different directions. But we couldn't have delivered that project without having that funding and then delivering a year, reporting, getting the next lot. So I was a bit concerned about that with the retrospective funding, because I don't know how anybody can deliver a project by finding the money themselves and then claiming it back once they've done that. I'd really love if, Chair, we could bring in some of the people that are running these projects that we've granted to experience an idea of not just their successes but what their barriers have been, because there will be a significant number of barriers. What you plan to do at the start of a project is sometimes not what you do at the end. It might be better, it might be worse, but I would really like to understand that human experience. And I was quite concerned that the Oval Bandstand seemed to be pulling back from TDC, and I hope that we're making every effort. I started taking an interest in Margate because I felt it was always them and us, and so I felt I needed to address my preconceptions about Ramsgate being the best place in Thanet and go and visit Margate. And so I got a much better understanding of why each of the towns are so special. And it seems to me that Oval Bandstand and the skate park is in such a prime location to actually be a really successful projects, particularly the Oval Bandstand. There isn't a cafe, well, there is a Palm Bay cafe, but it's not open, you've got to get a takeaway. And, you know, you follow some of the things that are happening, and the Oval Bandstand seems to be delivering things that local people are attending and want, so it's already successful. So I guess that's what my concern is. Can we have an idea of what money we've spent, what's it been spent on, and how successful it's been in part of this summing up? And I would also really like to speak to some of the people delivering the projects to see what their successes are and what their barriers have been. So I'm not sure if there was a question there, but I think there was about the funding. I find that difficult. The retrospective funding, I have no idea how that can work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
no, I was going to just come back on that. I was going to say, yeah, we can look at inviting maybe some from the Margate Town Deal Board or for the Creative Land Trust, and and people like that, just to come along and give us their experiences so far as we go along. Sorry.
thank you. I think back in April 22, we brought a report to Cabinet as part of the approval process for grants to be given to third parties, and as part of that we presented the grant agreement that we had drawn up. I've got my section 151 officer sat on my shoulder. Our auditors, both internal and external, are really watching these programmes, and we know the way in which the government has given Town Deal and Levelling Up funded areas the money is slightly unique in the way these grant programmes run. So we know that they are watching how we manage and run these programmes, and the comments earlier about the way we manage our money is true of that. And so one of the things that we did was we commissioned a legal team to develop a grant agreement so that the council is safeguarded from the risk of passing this funding on. We become the funder, but we're still responsible to central government. And as part of that, any grant application for £1 million or above, we are also bringing in the lawyers to put the specifics around those grant agreements so that we ensure that public money is safeguarded for that very specific investment. The Margate Creative Land Trust has already signed their grant agreement, but they haven't had big chunks of money because they are still looking for the site. So we have a particular drawdown process. Each of the projects will be run differently, and the funding will be allocated differently. I think when we're talking about big sums of capital funding, I don't think we are talking about retrospective funding for all of it. And so it is going to be on an individual kind of project by project basis how that is run. Dreamland don't have their 4 million. We don't have Dreamland's 4 million. That hasn't been drawn down yet. It's not programmed to be spent within this financial year. And which is why we'll be bringing a cabinet paper to approve that grant and the grant agreement. So all of those things are kind of happening in due process. Town deals across the country are predominantly projects that are being delivered by local authorities and or other big organisations because they're big sums of capital money. And the Margate Town Deal Board was really clear that it wanted some community as part of that. So even when we had a reduction in funding from central government, we ensured there were community projects within that. So yes, it's really important, and we're working with the skate park to think about how they set themselves up, thinking about how they engage with other funders, and they're doing quite a lot of that themselves, and working through all of the kind of challenges that each of those different organisations might be facing. I was just trying to think. So we do report on what has been spent. It's not huge amounts at the moment because we haven't been spending anything on buildings and assets. And as I said, as part of that kind of more simplified approach that we're trying to take a kind of a higher level across each of the programmes, we want to do a bit more of that. It's just I think we're in our fourth return for levelling up and third in town deals. So we're just trying to get a bit of balance on those to then be able to report better back to this. Going back to your first question about the access roads, we're commissioning a transport study to make sure that each of the things that we do, the road system works. We had a meeting with the head of highways at Kent County Council, and number one on our agenda was the tunnel. And, you know, I know that we have been lobbying and pushing really hard for that, and it has to do some of what you said earlier. So, yeah.
Councillor Patman.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. I've got a series of questions, but they're probably short, sharp answers, maybe from yourself. Theatre Royal, it's good to hear there's progress being made on the Theatre Royal. That's really welcomed. I know many performers across Thanet and people that go to watch performances will be welcome. I know you speak about not submitting the bid, but is there a way we can prioritise our bid over anyone else's across Thanet around the heritage funding? Because there is a real need for I know we've got the Granville open, and that's really great work by TDC and yourselves, but we do need the theatre in Margate as well. So that's one question. Winter Gardens, is that report available, the study report? So we can have a look at that and obviously share kind of views on that as well. And is there any scope around future investment in the Winter Gardens yet? Is there like a clear vision from your team around the Winter Gardens from all the data that's come out of that? That would be quite good to look at. My second point is around Dreamland. I'm not overly confident that the future of Dreamland is worth investment of £4 million at the moment, so I'd like to see more information around Dreamland and their future business plans and how they're going to use the £4 million to unlock future investment, because I kind of think there could be other areas that we could spend it that would be better invested around levelling up. The third question is East Kent College digital project. Work seems to have just stopped. That's the perception. So is there an update around that? The grass relationship at the moment, obviously we've had heavy media attention on the grass relationship, so it'd be good to have an update around how we're progressing with that, because I know we're all keen to progress with the grass relationship. The skate park, sorry, I said there was a lot, so the skate park, is there youth involvement in this? I know Councillor Cupp spoke about the youth council, but is there youth provision in this? And then finally, is there a project around how much is spent and the impact that that kind of money has had already on the local economy and things like that? I know that question, but thank you, Chair.
I will let you choose between yourself members which one I put in first, Clockhouse or Theatre Royal, and I'll leave that one there. But we are, we have to run through a programme of projects, and so it isn't just other stakeholders, but also we as an organisation don't want to be saying, well, you can't put your bid in because we're going to put ours in. So we've worked hard to programme that. We also have to do a lot of work. It isn't just, please, National Lottery, can we have 2 million, 3 million pounds. It's proving the significance of the heritage. There's a huge amount of work that needs to go into that, and engagement with stakeholders. So we've got the timing right, and the work to do within that programme. The evening and nighttime economy review, I'm actually about to go on holiday, which is why I've been running around like a headless chicken. But I'm hoping to have a kind of final draft at the end of next week to look at when I come back from leave. We've had a lot of engagement. There's some really interesting stats. We've done a lot of work around footfall, and there's things that we can share with the broader sector. It isn't a document for Thanet District Council with a long tick list of we're going to do all these things. It's about what the sector at large and the council can do together to improve our evening and nighttime economy, with a particular focus about the role of the Winter Gardens within that, but it'll be helpful for the Granville as well as the Theatre Royal. Future investment in the Winter Gardens. So we have just had the first draft of our heritage statement for the Winter Gardens, and I think it was 70 pages, but it's just really interesting reading, and there is some real interesting opportunities around that. And we were talking about briefing the marketing agency and using some of that to help that activity. All of those documents will be available. We're just at draft stage, so we need to kind of finalise those, but they will all form part of that pack that goes out to the broader sector. Dreamland, as I said, we're going to be putting more information online. I'm meeting with the team in the summer to start thinking about getting those timelines available and online, and they are doing some work around their programme and how, I mean, a lot of it is about how it unlocks other investment across the site, therefore creating more jobs and opportunities, and town deals were absolutely about how you unlock private investment. There's quite a lot of work going on that. Margate Digital, I haven't done an update today just because, there was a lot. But we are working with EKC Group and Homes England, who we are joint owners of the building with. There's been some challenges around the reclassification of further education colleges, which means they have to do lease arrangements different now than they did when we were about to sign one in October of last year. So we've got a kind of four-way conversation between the Department of Levelling Up, the Department for Education, Homes England, that's 5, us and EKC Group. But I'm happy to bring another update. Things around grass, so they have a grant agreement, which we talked about before. In order to unlock the capital investment, we need that grant agreement to be signed. They've had 25,000 upfront to support with project management costs, design costs, all of those things that can be capitalised. So we're waiting for that, and the Town Deal Board chair has been engaging with the organisation, which is their role to do that. So I think we'll need to wait and see. Skate Park, I know that they've got some engagement activities planned. I think this time of year is particularly busy for them. So we are working with them to put a programme together, including our health and wellbeing coordinator is working with them to think about what activities we can do. And it's too early to measure the impact on the economy.
Thank you for that really quick response to really long questions, and maybe we can bring someone from the Town Deal Board in, like you said. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. Just one thing before we go, one thing I want to pick up on. I'm sure I've read somewhere, we get a lot of stuff emailed to us, I'm sure I've read somewhere that the councils are now gearing up for another round of levelling up money. Are we looking at another round of levelling up money somewhere along the line? I just said, because you talked about the Lido and obviously Walpole Bay and how busy that was. We've got other beaches that are really busy, like Westbrook, where we've got that beautiful Logia building. I just think, are we looking to put another bid in?
As far as I'm aware, there are currently no announcements on levelling up round 3. We obviously have asked the question, and there have been things intimated that there will be another round. We have had no clarity. I don't think civil servants are necessarily clear what that might look like. We thought something might be launched in July. Nothing has been launched, so I suspect if there is, it'll be after the summer. We don't know if it will be linked with previous rounds, specific areas, specific themes. We don't know. We're obviously watching and waiting, and our ambition is large.
Excellent, thank you. So, members, I've completely forgot where we were. So this report will go to Cabinet. Do we have any recommendations? No recommendations. Okay, so we'll note that report. Thank you. Okay, so I think we just pause a couple of minutes. I'm sure officers want to get themselves off before we have the next couple of agenda items, because they're just committee discussions, so I'm pretty sure if officers want to leave, this is probably a good idea to go, and I thank you for you all coming along this evening. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 7, which is the review of the overview and scrutiny panel work programme for 23 to 24. We've all had that report circulated. I know we're all going to have a bit of a discussion about that now. So, members, got any questions or comments on the work report?
I think I've said what I wanted to say, which is that I am doubtful about our scoring mechanism. There are elements of it that I don't think are actually helpful to us in making the most of our role. I like the way that we've looked at what things can be done in, say, an intensive one day and what things have to be longer. That's really helpful. We've obviously got a lot of things that we want to look at. And I would like to argue once again that we need to look at every meeting at our externally funded projects in terms of timeline spend, those kinds of things, not in terms of full presentation. Grateful as I am for the full presentation this evening.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, obviously, in the report, there's a number of topics that have been picked, and we've had to use the matrix that we got to score, and the officers have scored. I mean, I'm not sure, is there things on that list that you were hoping were going to be there and not there, or are you happy that all the topics are there?
I'm happy with what I've seen of the topics. It was just that I think that the scoring, because we have prioritised things like what will save us money and what's been on the list for a long time, I don't think those are actually helpful, looking at the broader role of the bit of overview and scrutiny that we learnt about in the training sessions, which allow us to be much more ambitious about the role of this panel, that's all.
Okay, So looking at the list of all the topics that were put forward, I mean, obviously the list is there. I mean, looking at item B, I mean, we've had the update on the externally funded projects this evening. There's obviously 2 other things there which we can have that ask for those reports going forward. But if we look at the first list, the scrutiny review project topics, is there anything that springs to mind that members would like to get involved with, you know, in the near term? On 2.4A, scrutiny review project topics. And then you've got planning enforcement review, fly tipping abandoned vehicles, review of protocols, procedures, emergency decisions, health and wellbeing, impact of tourism, grant funding review and the cost of living crisis.
Having proposed the planning enforcement review, I think I'd rather like to be involved with that. Likewise, review of protocols and procedures for emergency decisions. If that's okay.
Councillor Bright.
Sorry, I was just picking up on Councillor Austin's point just then about sort of wider issues, and obviously I wasn't here at the last ones, but I watched it with great interest. Just thinking of the amount of housing that's going up, we looked on planning last night. There was the small piece of land that abuts the 1600 house development. There's a lot of development going to happen. Obviously, we can't look at infrastructure in terms of, and I know you talked about this in the previous meeting, you talked about dentists and doctors, because we don't have any control over that. But one of the things that did occur to me, I was reading an article today about a big development, I think in Cambridgeshire, that has thousands of houses and nothing else other than houses. Have we got any kind of thoughts about trying to build in some sense of community to these new developments? We need the new developments, we need these houses, but I don't think a development or an area becomes a place if it doesn't have any retail units there, or it doesn't have any pubs there, or churches there, or community centres. So is there a way that we can bring that element to overview and scrutiny, just how we encourage developers of big developments to think about forming a community, whether we use 106 money or whatever we use to ensure that there's some sense of community and some central point to their developments.
Yeah, that's something you could invite. I'm sure Bob would.
Is it tonight?
Yeah, well, it's not so much Bob; it's Bob's team. But I'm sure that you could extend an invitation to probably Adrian.
I mean, I don't know what anyone else thinks.
And he could then come along, speak to the panel on that issue, and then if you wanted to delve in it deeper, you could then potentially complete one of the review forms and submit it as an idea for a review based upon the feedback you get from Adrian. I don't know whether Bob would want to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd be happy to come and speak to the panel from an officer perspective about the work that we're doing. But yeah, if you might want others to, external organisations to speak to you, and you can always invite them. Obviously whether they come or not is a matter for them, but we would certainly be happy to come and talk to you about the work that we're doing ourselves.
I'm sure if the local plan update cabinet advisory group is starting up again soon. I know you're the chair, Councillor.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, obviously scrutiny can call what it wants to call to scrutiny within the Constitution, but I think possibly a better place for that work is the local plan review group, which is less formal and purely focused on planning matters, obviously. So maybe you want to see how that group evolves, and it will be meeting soon. Decision notice is going to be issued imminently, and then maybe think about whether you want to involve scrutiny in it.
Thanks.
Chair, can I just say something on that? I was just going to say that obviously the Green Group was hoping that some of that sort of discussion would happen in the debate that we have in October around our proposal to pause planning for large developments pending a review, the review to consider some of the sorts of elements that Councillor Bright was talking about.
Councillor Faruqi.
I'd like to be involved in health and wellbeing. It's obviously my area of interest. I'm not sure how, I don't want to make a long meeting any longer, but I'm not sure if you're aware that CCG framework changed last July. So we no longer have commissioning care groups, and it changed to integrated care systems. There are about 37 covering England, and there's a trend now towards devolving some more of that money towards social care into local government. So I think that's just something we should be aware of moving forward as well.
Yes, sure. I think the health and well-being topic it's very broad. I think it encompasses housing and everything else we was going to bring into that, I think. But yeah, certainly if we take that topic forward, then yeah, we certainly can be a part of that. I think what we need to do is pick maybe 3 for this year. I think we're not going to get more than 3 done in over the course of the year, and I think we need to pick 3. I know I have my favourite one, but I know we need to discuss it amongst ourselves. I know the impact of tourism was quite broadly welcomed last time, which is something I would like to look at. But sorry.
Can I remind members that maybe this discussion would better be held by looking at the annex, I think it's Annex 2 to this report, so that members can either discard or rearrange because these are the topics that members came up with, which we then prioritized. But it's up to members to rearrange them in the manner they like. But these are virtually the topics that they said, these are the topics we'd like to work on for this year.
So can I go to Councillor Green next?
Yes, Chair. I mean, I was going to say something similar. We've put forward, and we have put them all forward, a dozen or so topics. The officers have scored them to our agreed scoring system. Surely we should go with that. New topics are all very well, and we can talk about them down the line, but let's at least get the first 2 or 3 topics on agendas through the scoring system. Now, I happen to think that our scoring system works against broader topics. Yeah. It's more focused on stuff that's directly related to the council, not to the general area. So perhaps we could discuss that at some point down the line. But for now, let's stick to what we've got with the scoring system.
Yeah, definitely, Councillor Green. I've had the discussion with Nick, to put scoring as an agenda item for a future date when we look at topics again. But I think if we work with the list we've got, as I say, so I think we just between us pick the top three out of that list, maybe, I don't know, or work the way down. It's up to members how they want to do it.
Just on the rankings that are currently there, I would like to formally propose that we look at 3 subjects then with regards to these rankings, and given the time that you think that we've got in this year to look at those. So the first in the priority is the impact of tourism, then the fly tipping and abandoned vehicles, and then the grant funding review as ranked. And I think that they have been ranked in that order, and that's what I propose, those 3. Obviously other members are able to propose others, but I just thought I'd get the ball rolling on those. Thank you, Chair.
So just grant funding, impact of tourism, what was the third one? Fly tipping, okay. Does anybody want to change that or agree with that? I've got a second. Well, I've got loads of seconders, and Councillor David.
Planning enforcement review. There was a planning review in progress before, but it fizzled into nothing, December or late last year. There are a huge number of issues, particularly with planning enforcement, which is why I'd raised it when I did. And I understand and I support the point scoring system. I don't think we're that far adrift on that, and given that it's been on the programme but doesn't count as being on the programme for point scoring, I think that should be allocated and we should include it in the 3, please. Entirely up to members, okay. Obviously. But
John, could we do it as a one day to start off with?
And then enlarge it.
So if I just suggest, I mean, look at Bob, I'm sure that if we invite Ian along as an alternative to doing a review, to come along and update on where we're at with planning enforcement.
Yeah.
Well, of course, if you invite Ian and myself along to talk about planning enforcement, we'd happily do that. There was previously a planning enforcement review, and that led to some changes to the planning enforcement protocol. So there were some outcomes of that. But let's not say you shouldn't have a look at it again if you want to.
That's very interesting, because given the amount of cases and the evidence that we're dealing with at the moment, it's good that there was an outcome and some stronger protocols, but I'd now question whether they need to be reviewed or the implementation of them looked at, because of the number of cases that there are that are not proceeding or are not being dealt with adequately.
Yeah.
Which one of the 3 do you want to drop off to replace with the planning enforcement one?
Impact of tourism, fly tipping and abandoned vehicles, and the grant funding review. Does Right, so we've got a proposition that we drop off impact of tourism and put in a planning enforcement review. Does anybody want to second that? So we continue with the three that we've agreed, and then we'll invite someone from planning enforcement to come along at a future meeting to give us a full rundown. That's not what we were agreeing, no?
Could I suggest another process? So if we've agreed those three, could we then make another proposal to say that if we are in a position where we have undertaken those three, can we ensure that the planning enforcement review is the next on the list if we have the time to do so?
Well, of course, because we're going to work from this list anyway. So yeah, that would automatically up to members then to choose the next ones going forward. But I think if we've got a proposition, we've got a seconder. We had an amendment that nobody seconded. So I think going forward, the three that we're going to choose are impact of tourism, grant funding review, and the fly tipping. So Councillor Curry is going to say.
That were requested for officer reports, and to just ask how they will be progressed, and is there a timeline on the reports?
Obviously, we progress one tonight, and then we can look at a future meeting. I think we can look at a different one for the next meeting, but I think we can definitely get these onto the future meetings for presentation from officers. Yeah, I think obviously we're going to maybe have a planning enforcement before that, but. Councillor Austin.
With all due respect, I think that getting a presentation from an officer about planning is a very different matter from looking at a planning enforcement review. I think they're two separate things. That's not in any way to decry officer presentations, but I don't think it does, as I understand it, I don't think it's going to do what Councillor Davis is concerned it should do. But
it won't, but if we could get an officer... Sorry. I think I agree with Councillor Austin. However, if it got us started on the topic, and then it may inform future activity, so long as that's the case. If it's not a case of, well, he's spoken, so that's it, it could be that presentation leads to a request for further activity. Yeah?
Yeah, that was my suggestion, was just to bide over in the time. Just
sorry if I appear a bit thick, I'm just clarifying where we are with it. So.
Councillor Green.
That suggestion, coupled with the site of the previous review, which wasn't that long ago, could help to bring that together.
Yeah, I agree. So we've got the three going forward: impact of tourism, fly tipping, and grant funding, in that order. Okay, so we will look to set up working groups for those three going forward. Oh, do we want to set up a group tonight?
Well, we can do one.
So obviously it's cross-party working group. So how many people would you like on it? Would you like two from each group? Two Greens, two Reds, two Blue? Or three? Okay.
It's more the total size. You'd probably want, what, five people?
So for the impact of tourism, do we have volunteers for the working group? 1, 2, 3. I was looking at you, George, because you just... There's 3. Have anybody else? Councillor Green. Oh, we've got 5.
5.
There you go. Sorry, Councillor.
I don't mind, because I'd much rather fly tipping and abandoned vehicles.
That's all settled in. So we have our first review group, working group, settled on the impact of tourism. going forward? Okay, so we all agree? Okay, thank you.
On the forward plan.
And item 8, the last one of the evening. I'm losing track now after being here for 3 hours. Has everybody looked at the forward plan and exempt decision list? Is there anybody wish to make a comment? No. Okay. So can we all, Councillor Green?
I'd just like to make the comment I made last time. It's almost impossible to know what it's talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It needs
thanks.
improving.
So that concludes the business for tonight's meeting, a very long meeting. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all to the officers. Thank you to the Cabinet members, and good night.